in the past with stormwater management review. So if we need him in the future, we would have the ability to use him.
Mr. Alesso?
Yes.
Ms. Van Order?
Yes.
Mr. Flowers?
Yes.
Mr. Rabbit?
Yes.
Ms. Murphy?
Yes.
Mr. Benoit?
Yes.
Mr. Quillen?
Yes.
Ms. Bariglia?
Yes.
Mr. Vine?
Yes.
So moved.
And next, we have our professional appointments for the year 2025, which we would like to appoint Jim Slate as board engineer, David Hanson, alternate board engineer, Bernie Sanger as alternate board engineer, and Sonia Santiago as our board secretary. And I have
Do we need a resolution, a motion for that? or
I
is that-
believe, yes, a motion to accept those, I think.
That's not a resolution
think so.
historically, so a motion second. then-
Motion second and a voice vote.
I
Right.
make a motion that we move on what the chairman just said.
I'll second what the chairman just said.
Never be wrong with that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
We need a roll.
Unanimous. Right. No, that one is not. Okay, and then we have our site inspection committees, which again, these are my appointments. So I would like, for the site inspection committee, a number of our standing committees. So I'd like to appoint Michael Nunn again, Chief Nunn, as the chairperson of the site inspection committee, with Mr. Alesso and myself also on that committee. The street naming committee, I still say, I've said this for the last 2 years, that we're not going to let Mr. Benoit or Mr. Pullen off until they actually get to name a street.
Oh, am I on that committee? Okay.
So yes, you are. And the legislative committee, we are fortunate again to have, Mr. Griglia and Mr. Rabbits with us. So, they will be our legislative committee. And Jesse, I'm assuming he would continue as our open space committee representative designee.
Sure.
Okay, so there's our standing committee structure for the year. And I don't think that's my prerogative. I don't think we need a vote on those. So, we do have a couple more resolutions.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman, I apologize for interrupting. We may have skipped the TCC form.
Oh, did it skip? Oh, yes.
Even though that's usually.
I did. Oh, I don't want to skip the TCC. Important work. I gather there are municipalities that don't have things like the TCC.
Not all do, and
And I've talked to people who really find it very, people really difficult to deal with that because you get a lot of issues resolved before they go into public meetings, and public meetings don't drag on. And so I really appreciate the work that the TCC does. So we will have Mr. Warner, Mr. Phillips, and Mr. Slate on our TCC, continuing on the TCC. And again, appreciate the work that you do, moving things forward and getting things straight before we have to deal with it. So thank you. Thanks for reminding me there. I passed over it. Okay, a couple of resolutions here on selecting the meeting dates. We all have the meeting dates there. They're published. They have been out for the meeting dates. I would entertain a motion to accept these meeting dates for the coming year.
I make a motion, we accept the meeting dates for the year 2025.
Second.
I believe that is a roll call. That's the resolution.
Yes.
Mr. Alesso? Ms. Van Order?
no early voting, board member.
Ms. Van Order?
Yes.
Mr. Flowers?
Yes.
Mr. Rabbit?
Yes.
Ms. Murphy? Yes. Mr. Benoit?
Yes.
Mr. Quillen?
Yes.
Mr. Bariglia?
Yes.
Mr. Vine?
Yes.
So moved.
And finally, the designation of our official newspapers, designating the Morris County Daily Record as the official paper of the planning board, and the Morris News be designated as an additional newspaper to receive notice of meetings.
I'll move that, and I'm glad we still have newspapers.
Yeah.
I'll second.
I'll second that. We sold newspapers.
Again, roll call.
Mr. Alesso?
Yes.
Ms. Van Order?
Yes.
Mr. Flowers?
Yes.
Mr. Rabbit?
Yes.
Ms. Murphy?
Yes.
Mr. Benoit?
Yes.
Mr. Quillen?
Yes.
Ms. Bariglia?
Yes.
Mr. Vine?
Yes.
So moved.
Thank you very much. That pretty much concludes the reorganization portion of our meeting, and I would like to again thank everyone. It looks very much the same as last year, the board itself, but I have a feeling that our schedule will be very much different than it was last year. So appreciate everyone stepping up and the work that they've done in the past, and will continue to do. Thank you very much. So now moving on to the regular meeting. The first thing you'll notice is the issue dealing with Red Oak School, which you may have been confused to see on the agenda again. And I will let Mr. Warner explain where we are and what we might have to, what we might be able to do about this.
Certainly, Mr. Chairman, and I may have a little assistance as well in explaining, but I'll at least kick it because we do have some representatives and I believe perhaps even counsel for Red Oaks here this evening as well. But just to remind the board, this was an approval granted not too long ago by the board, about a month or so ago. And at the time, there was one condition. Actually, at the time, the representatives of the school and the architect were here that evening. Were under the impression that a wooden sign was a temporary fixture that did not, as the school did previously have an approved temporary sign. They had indicated that that wooden sign, which was thought to be a temporary sign, would be removed. And that was understood to be a condition of the approval. I leave it to the board as to whether it was material or not as a condition. But nevertheless, apparently the representatives at the time were not correct in their understanding. Upon closer examination, after discussion with other school stakeholders, they were informed that the wooden sign was actually intended to be a permanent fixture and actually had been part of a landscape plan that was approved by the township through a zoning permit. All of that was provided under cover of counsel for the applicant from the Fox Rothschild firm. That letter with the attachments being dated December 2024 before all the board members provided to all the board members. So I probably stole a little of the thunder. I took the wind out of the sign. I don't know if that's possible, but out of the sails perhaps. But nevertheless, that's the understanding. So they wish to, as I understand it, asked the board to consider whether they would make that modification to the approval. But as the board knows, if it is a material condition, then my advice would be that they should notice and have another hearing to eliminate or excise that condition from the approval. We have not yet adopted the resolution, but the decision was rendered. And so I thought it best that the board make that determination after hearing from me, and if possible, which it is, hearing from them, and then you can make that determination. So with the chair's permission, maybe we should invite council and representatives to let the board know where and how I got it wrong, if at all.
Is there a reference as to microphone?
Maybe if you can come over here just for past precedent and introduce yourself. And I don't know if we need witness testimony or not. I mean, we're not going to have a hearing per se.
Right.
So you can make the representations with your clients here to the board, and the board can make a determination how we will proceed on this request.
Yeah, so good evening, members of the planning board. Ruben Perez of Fox Rothschild on behalf of Red Oak School, Inc. Mr. Warner pretty much described it perfectly. It's essentially, in short, we're just asking respectfully for an elimination of the condition that this wooden sign, which faces and fronts onto Speedwell Avenue, that condition be removed. Again, as Mr. Warner said, it was initially thought that it was a temporary sign. It's actually a more permanent sign. In the package that was provided to the planning board, as well as to the planning board secretary, in which Mr. Warner was referencing previously, you'll note in, I think it's Exhibit A, the actual sign. As you can see, it's a professionally made sign that is a part of pretty much that landscape area, and so that's really the only request at this time.
Well, yes, go ahead.
No, I was just going to fess up at the outset.
Before you do, please give your name and address.
So I'm Chris Weaver. I'm the head of school. Do you want my home address or do you want the school address?
The business address is fine for the record. And again, this is not a hearing, so I'm not going to swear you in, but with counsel, if you're explaining the circumstances, at least for the board to decide how to proceed, that's acceptable.
Okay, and we're at 238 Speedwell Ave. I started in the job over the summer. The sign thing has been going on for probably 2 years or so. And I pointed to the only other sign I knew of on the campus, that small wooden sign, because the temporary sign had long since been taken down. So that's my mea culpa.
And if that's all from counsel for the plaintiff with respect to the explanation of what's before the board now, again, I've said it 3 times, so but I'll say it a 4th, not a public hearing, at least as of yet. I think Mr. Slate may have some information that helps inform your decision as well. And that is with respect to the landscape plan, because the representation was made in council's letter that the current wooden sign was part of a landscape plan that was approved by the township through a zoning permit. See attached, Exhibit C. That zoning permit is attached, and I believe there's a landscape plan attached
Yes.
as well. Correct. And but Tim, maybe you could speak to whether or not that zoning plan is on the site plan that was, or the landscape plan, excuse me, that was part of the permit application.
I can confirm that the sign is shown as part of that one.
Okay. So the confirmation of the representation made by counsel in his letter is the point there. So if there's nothing further, does the board have any questions, or any board members have any questions as to how to proceed before
Well,
we discuss and make that determination?
well, I would note, having gone through that, as Jim says, it was on the plan, but you notice that, in the documentation that came with that, they applied for permission for a temporary sign at the same time they applied for the permit for the permanent sign as part of the landscape plan. I guess clearly because the landscape plan would take longer to implement, so they wanted to put the temporary sign up there. Temporary sign's no longer there; it's been removed. And personally, I voted and thought that we were asking them to remove a temporary sign. The temporary sign's no longer there. So as far as I'm concerned, it's no big deal. We could remove that condition without a big problem.
I agree.
Yes, Ms. Murphy.
I'd like to just echo those comments. I actually was surprised to hear that you were removing the sign that was out closer to the street, but went along with you when you said you were going to do that. It's actually a very attractive sign and is no longer a temporary sign. So I wouldn't have any problem removing that condition either. And in my opinion, you don't need to come back for another hearing.
Yeah, Mr. Lasso.
So I'm just a little confused. So when we gave them approval to put signage on the outside of the building, there was a temporary sign that we thought was temporary that was no longer there.
Right.
And it is no longer there. But the permanent sign, which is, I guess, the one at the entryway where you would make the right turn into the church, the left side, right on Speedwell, there's a sign, it's a permanent sign, that's going to stay. So it's basically, you're leaving the permanent sign that's there that we thought was a temporary sign that would be taken down.
Right.
Okay, now I understand.
I believe that's accurate. As I think the mea culpa was already indicated, there was a misunderstanding from the applicant's perspective. Certainly, the board did not make any mistakes whatsoever. It's just simply they understood a permanent sign to be a temporary sign.
But the permanent sign stays.
Well, I'm sorry?
But the permanent sign.
The permanent
stays.
sign is
Yes.
staying. It's not a temporary sign that's going. That's really the difference.
Yeah, Mr. Evans.
Just real quickly, and again, echoing the comments of my colleagues, this is a fine-looking sign. I see no reason not to remove that stipulation and the misunderstanding of what was permanent and what this sign is. This is a fine-looking sign that adds to the aesthetics of the property.
And if I understand from the dialogue of the board members, in essence, it was not a material condition or even the intention of the board to have the removal of that wooden sign take place as part of the granting of the balance of the approval, which was, if I recall correctly, a wall sign.
Right.
And if that's accurate, then I would assume, unless any board members have any further questions or concerns, then we've, in essence, clarified the decision that the board made. A resolution memorializing that decision will be forthcoming for our next meeting. and the applicant is not put through the burden perhaps of, although it should be a pleasure to come before our board. Coming back to our board for another hearing. If I'm
Correct.
correct in that regard?
I believe you're correct, yes, I think.
Then that is the instruction to me to advise the applicant who is now so advised, so that'll be modified, and the memorializing resolution hopefully will be adopted at our next meeting.
Terrific.
Thank
you, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for coming in.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, moving on to our first public hearing. We have another amended site plan on that. Could you introduce that for us, Sonia?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Our next application is CB-07-24, Madison Avenue, Urban Renewal LLC, for an amended site plan /ban. This is lot 8409, lot 1, 315 Madison Avenue, in the RDP zone, redevelopment plan zone. Applicant proposes to reduce the scope and scale of the previously approved plan for the redevelopment of the Abbey Arcade Hall for a furniture showroom and a restaurant.
Mr. Warner?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and as I always do, I like to make sure that the board has jurisdiction by way of the notice before we get too far, if at all, into the application. I did have an opportunity to review the notice. I found the content of the notice to be sufficient. I found it to be timely served and published, served by certified mail on January 2nd, published on January 2nd as well, both at least 10 days prior to this evening's hearing date. So the board does have jurisdiction, in my opinion, to hear the application, and if it's completed, decide the application this evening. And I know we have counsel for the applicant, so I'll turn it back to the chair.
Okay. So, Mr. Vitolo, would you like to introduce yourself and
Yes, sir.
what we're facing this evening?
Yes, and it's very nice to see everybody. Larry David said Happy New Year is usually good 3 or 4 weeks in, so I think I'm within that. And it's good to see everyone, including Mr. Warner's Pocket Square,
Thank you.
which I understand. There was I'm going to bring in another chair for that Pocket Square. I'm with the law firm of Sills, Cummins and Gross. I represent the applicant. This is RH's application for amended site plan, which we are making pursuant to the Abbey Alnwick Hall redevelopment plan. We were last before this board in or about the summer of 2022. And at that time, this board approved a significant change to the facade of the new gallery restaurant building, an increase in the number of restaurant seats. The board also required RH to save certain of the windows in the stained glass windows in the Abbey. And it also approved RH's decision to keep the southern wing of the Abbey, which was scheduled for demolition. As you will hear from our professional this evening, we're proposing to reduce the size of this project. You're going to hear from our witnesses by approximately a third. It's not an exact number, but this reduction in scale will allow us to park the entire development on site. As you may recall, there was off-site parking that was allocated for this project, and we had stacked parking or double-loaded parking. That has been eliminated. And so we'll be able to have everyone on site. And for that reason, we also will not need valet parking. Everyone will be allowed to self-park on the site. We're also reducing the number of restaurant seats, proposing some minor revisions to the floor plans. And we're proposing to demolish the southern wing of the Abbey, which was the original plan for this project, pursuant to the redevelopment plan. There was a change to keep it as a ruin, but now having looked at it and looked at the scale of the project, we don't need that portion in our business plan anymore. So we're going back to the original intent of the redevelopment plan. Regarding the whys for the changes and the reduction in scale, you're going to hear this evening from the gentleman to my right. This is RH's Chief Real Estate and Development Officer, Jared Stool. We also intend to call in support of this application are civil engineer Afton Savitz, our, uh-oh. Are we okay?
Okay.
Okay.
Sounds like it was rolled back to the beginning of the meeting.
I was going to say my pocket square joke wouldn't land that well in the second go.
No, it came out of his laptop.
Okay,
He's recording.
great. So as I said, we intend to call in support of this application our civil engineer Afton Savitz, our architect Russell Pacala, and our planner Matt Seckler. We also have traffic, landscape, and operations witnesses here should the board have any questions specific to those disciplines. So with that, board, thank you again for having us. We are ready to begin our case and to call our first witness.
Mr. Chairman, with your permission, I can swear in all the witnesses that we intend to have or even may have to play it safe. So if they'll all stand, raise their right hand, as well as our board professionals, Mr. Phillips and Mr. Slate can raise their right hand. Do all of you swear to God or affirm that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you all.
Thank you very much, Mr. Warner. And so first we'll call Mr. Jared Stoll.
Thank you, Frank. Good evening, members of the board. First off, as Frank mentioned, I'm reasonably new to RH. I joined about a year ago. And
Could you again state your role?
Chief Real Estate and Development Officer for Restoration Harbor.
Thank you.
And if you could just give us a business address is fine for the record.
Right.
Sure. 15 Cock Road, Corte Madera, California, 94925.
I'm sorry, could you spell your name?
Jarrett, Jarrett. Last name Stahl, Stuhl.
Thank you.
And so I joined RH on January 16th of last year. And so one of the priorities upon coming on board with the organization was to take a look at what has been in the pipeline for quite some time. And Gary, our chairman and CEO of the organization, brought me through this project over the first sort of 90 days of my timeline at the organization. And what I'd been made aware of at the time is that the project had obviously had years of approvals, design, redesign, and was finally out to bid. Come about May of last year, we received our bids for the project from Whiting Turner. And what had come to light is that in a post-COVID world, the project had grown from a cost and escalated to a point where the organization was unable to make it work from a business perspective. Cost of construction had gone up, and we looked at it and said our original underwriting plan did not necessarily align with our ability to make the investment that we had proposed historically. I appreciate that the site, over the last several years has been left in a state of disarray. And over the last several months, as I'm sure you've seen on site, we've made the investment to get it cleaned up, to get it safe, with our intent for this project to hopefully kick off in the springtime. The reductions that you're going to hear about today were really all based with the intent of maintaining the architectural integrity and the design integrity, however, reducing the scale down from an operational perspective and being able to have a building that we can build efficiently within the cost parameters of what we had originally underwritten and had been approved by our internal board. This is a project that is very near and dear to Gary and to the entire organization. It's something that, quite frankly, there's a level of embarrassment that it's sat around for the period of time that it has. And since my first meeting, coming out here in the beginning of September and working with the TCC and the team here, it seems as if there's, a level of enthusiasm and excitement to get it built. It is our intent to get it built. It's our intent to build this project as originally designed in terms of the quality of the materials, the quality of the architecture, and the quality of our operation. The reductions in scope and scale of the project are purely from an efficiency perspective. There's no intent to value engineer any of the architecture, any of the design, but purely scale it down and have less of an impact on the property. With that said, I look forward to the support and hearing any feedback you might have and any questions that come up. So thank you for your time.
We'll make Mr. Stahl available for questions.
Yep. Any questions?
I guess I have a question about the degree to which you're scaling back. It doesn't seem like that much of a reduction in terms of the floor space. In particular, it's not that much of a reduction, I believe.
Correct. In terms of overall floor space, and I'll let the experts speak to it correctly, but roughly about a third of the overall square footage. But when you extrapolate out the height reductions and the scale reductions, in addition to the restaurant reducing by roughly half in terms of total seat count, those all add up. And, you know, it's for us, it's a game of inches and dollars. Every square foot saved is one less brick to put on the building, one less seat to put in. From a furniture perspective, it's one less thing to procure. So as we've looked at it, we think these reductions are sensible and will get us to where we need to be.
The restaurant is being scaled back by about 50%, right? But the rest of the building is being scaled back by much less than 1/3.
Correct. As well as the removal of the ruins that needed to be structurally reinforced. There are areas in terms of investment that we have previously planned to go ahead and make, and taking those out will allow us to meet our budgetary goals.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Of course.
Is it appropriate to ask for questions from the public at this point?
Members of the board.
I just have a
board
quick- I have a-
Professionals, if any, after the board.
Oh, yes, right.
I just have a quick question on the restaurant. And I wasn't on the planning board, you know, back in the heyday when this was being discussed. But I saw that the restaurant is half the seating capacity, but I didn't see on anywhere where the actual restaurant itself size has been reduced. Has the restaurant size been reduced in half?
The overall box of the restaurant?
Yeah, the box.
We've made it symmetrical, so it's changed slightly in shape before, and I'll have to defer to the architects in terms of the exact dimensions, but now it's a perfect square, whereas before, Russell, what were the exact dimensions previously?
The restaurant was 3,600 square feet. We're down to about 2,400.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would just note that in general, it wasn't easy to determine what the changes were from the original plans. I had them, so I could go back and look, and even that didn't make it easy to try to understand where the savings came. But yeah, yes, it is smaller.
Thank you.
So, and
And can I ask also?
Yes.
If I recall correctly, which I certainly may not have, the wine bar was eliminated with the last application, but it appears to be in there again. Right, so that's within the 2,400 square feet, within that
Correct.
dining area.
Yeah, so there are two service bars that are balanced and symmetrical on the entryway into the restaurant, which do act as service bars to serve the patrons. But there is no seating at the bar per se. They are service
That was my
bars.
question. Okay,
Correct.
so it's there for
Service.
servers, not for people to sit at.
Correct. There are no seats at the bar. They are
Okay.
purely service counters.
Thank you.
yeah,
People stand at the bar and get drinks.
They are not designed in our experience across our 23 restaurants that we operate. None of them have patrons that are standing. They're built with coffee machines and service counters for our servers to be able to pick up and distribute within the restaurant.
so just in general, you see the ruins will be gone, okay? But the other portions that Ms. Vitello mentioned, the windows will still be saved.
Correct.
The landscaping, other than because of the change in kind of the configuration, the landscaping essentially stays the same on that. The sidewalks outside and the sidewalk extension up that remains also.
Correct.
Okay, that's. Any other questions? Anything from our board professionals?
No questions. None here.
No questions.
Anything from, any questions of this witness from the public?
You have a time frame as to when it's going to be completed?
I'm sorry.
Could you please step up to the microphone
If
and,
anybody has any, if I may, Mr.
Yes.
Chairman, I'm sorry to jump. If anyone has any questions, and if you're not familiar with how this works, there'll be other witnesses who'll be addressing, I believe, architecture, planning, and engineering. So more detail. This was sort of a general, as I understand.
No, but that question is.
However,
right,
yes.
that one.
I mean, you're good. Suggest you sit down. I just wanted you to know how it works. But please feel free to come up and ask questions, but there will be questions after each witness.
And at this point, I'd also remind everyone that the questions are for the witnesses and what they have said. There will be time at the end for general comments on the
also have an opportunity after all the
But so these portion of the public comments are to ask, or public questions are to ask questions of the witnesses. So thank you for stepping up and going first.
We've just demonstrated a lawyer joke. My apology. Please remember your question because I think their attorney said he remembers it and this gentleman might be able to answer it.
Oh, good. Without me asking it again, right?
Perhaps.
What am I supposed to do? My name?
Name and address.
Name and address.
Linda Wilson, 22 Crescent Drive, Morris Township. And I guess do you have a time frame on, well, actually now that I'm here, I was under the impression under the first iteration that the restaurant was going to be inside the building that's already there. Is that wrong?
The restaurant is not inside the existing building. It's a new building that we are proposing.
Inside.
No, not to my knowledge.
So, that's my mistake. And do you have a time frame as to when you're going to be able to finish this?
Our intent is to go ahead and complete our plans over the next several months, subject to the feedback we received this evening. Our goal would be to start our construction in the springtime, and we anticipate it'll take somewhere roughly between 14 and 20 months to complete.
And will it be open all at once or in parts?
No, we will do one opening. There will not be a phased opening. Of course.
Thank you.
Yes.
Paul Gammerding, 63 Canfield Road. So the only question I really have is the entrance and exit of the facility on Canfield. I think originally it was only supposed to go towards Madison Avenue. So I just wanted to see if that was still in the way the plan was set up.
Okay.
We'll have our engineer answer the ingress egress questions if that's okay.
Because I think the concern would be more from people in Canfield, if traffic's going to be coming one way or the other way. So that's all I have.
Sure. And we'll get our engineer to answer that. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Any more questions for the public? Okay, then you could proceed with the next witness. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, we're next going to call Afton Savage. She's the civil engineer for the project. And we'll need just a minute for her to.
Okay.
We have sets, printed sets of the plans we're showing this evening and the exhibits. Would everyone like one to follow along, or would you rather follow along?
I'll take one.
Are these different from what you submitted?
No,
They're the presentations,
yeah, so it's.
but they're what we submit.
So this will all be marked as one exhibit.
Okay,
It's a
okay.
presentation that we're making that incorporates the plans and a new color rendering,
Oh, okay. Yes, I would, yeah. Thank you.
color site plan.
Right.
Thank you.
Something the size we can actually deal
I
with.
can't read those screens anyway.
Yeah, no, I agree. Yeah,
I'm old. Thank you.
thank you. Whoops.
Thank you.
Oh, that's very nice.
Thank you. Oh, there we go. Yes, this answers my question.
Much clearer.
Thank you.
Yes. Yeah, yeah, it wasn't easy.
No,
I was
that's why I had to ask.
I was just trying to figure out this shrinkage, how they got the parking over there. And that was really hard to find.
Right.
Yeah, that's great.
You have to move the building in.
Yeah.
Okay.
You ready? Okay. Could you, again, name? Oh, she's still setting up.
Oh, no.
Do we have, how many people are watching at home?
There are a few.
Good evening, Chairman, members of the boards, Aft and Savitz from Stonefield Engineering.
And Ms. Savitz, you caused or you caused these plans or you drafted these plans for this project?
I did,
And
yes.
you're familiar with the plan?
I am, yes.
And can you just give the board the benefit of your education and your experiences and your licenses?
Sure. And business address is 92 Park Avenue, Rutherford, New Jersey, 07070. I earned a Bachelor's of Science from Bucknell University in Civil Engineering. I've been working in the field of land development for over 12 years. I'm licensed in the state of New Jersey, and my license is in good standing.
Have you appeared before other boards before?
Yes, last month I was for the Morristown Planning Board, the Mendham Land Use Board, previously Morristown Zoning Board. Very familiar with the area.
Okay, yes, I certainly will accept qualifications. Please proceed.
Great. So the packet that was handed out to you, we also have on the screen. This is a 17-page document, which we'll mark for the record.
A1.
A1.
We'll just refer that to as the, what would you like to refer to it as? It does have some page numbers, at least part of it.
Partially, it is, yeah, correct. Cumulatively 17 sheets. It's dated January 13th, 2025.
We'll call it public presentation.
Yeah.
And this will be used for testimony throughout this evening, not just my own.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I'll move to the second sheet of the set. And what you're seeing is an aerial imagery replicating the prior condition on the property for orientation of the board. This is block 8409, lot 1, address 355 Madison Avenue for New Jersey Route 124. The lot area in total is 3.92 acres. We are in the open space government use Abbey Allen McCall redevelopment plan area. And the orientation, which will be consistent throughout this presentation, is north is diagonally to the intersection of Madison and Canfield. So I'll use the cursor or the hand that I believe is visible on all screens to circle that. That is Madison Avenue on the bottom of the page. Canfield Avenue is extending vertically up the right-hand side of the page. Again, north is directed in that direction. South is the opposite or the top left property line corner. Under existing conditions, there is frontage both on Madison and Canfield, both front yards, noting Madison under state jurisdiction. Travel direction is north-south. Under existing conditions along that frontage, there is no curb or sidewalk. Additionally, the same existing condition on Canfield, though under local jurisdiction. The existing structure, as we all know well, the Abbey, previously still a two-story building, proposed for renovation. And the lot geometry, though you can't see the property line here, I will transition to the next slide and it will become more visible, is generally rectangular. In general, the slope of the site is relatively flat, but you note that the existing Abbey structure, if you've been to the property, is raised off the ground probably 1.5 feet relative to that existing grade. There are mature trees focused primarily in front of the Abbey that will remain to be protected. Again, similar to the previously approved application, a lot of the design intent remains. And I noted the conversation about trying to understand what's changed since the original or the prior approval. We did submit a summary of changes, but visually to help tell the story, the third sheet of this packet is a colorized site plan that is to the back or subdued relative to an outline of a polygon that is blue or a tealish cyan blue color. What that's indicative of is the previous building footprint. So you'll notice it is centered on the page, the Abbey, and again, I'll use my cursor just to identify from left to right. The Abbey is along the left-hand side or that southwest location to remain. You note the western wing, as mentioned by council and consistent with the redevelopment plan, previously was going to be restored, is now going to be removed. And as you notice, as you work towards Canfield, again on the right-hand side, you notice that the building is coming down in size. And as a result, the buildings, if you were to treat them as separate, though they're all interconnected, they become closer to one another pulling back from the property lines where feasible. Of course, the Abbey will remain in location. And then as a result, there's more space to work with on the property. So this application, as mentioned previously by both the council and Jarrett, what it does is it looks to balance the site, both the development of the building, the uses on the site, the parking, all of it centered on the subject property. Where you'll remember, you'll recall, the redevelopment plan is written for that larger density with 2/3 of the parking to be concentrated on the site, where previously we were seeking overflow parking across Canfield. That's no longer being proposed as part of the application this evening. And just for reference, as it relates to the background, and I will transition to the next slide to focus entirely on the proposed design here. What you'll also recall is in the upper left-hand corner or closer to the residential properties or that southeastern property line, there used to be tandem parking. Tandem parking was permitted by the redevelopment plan, maxed out at a certain quantity. In that location, it's now balanced for that of pervious coverage, not to mention stormwater purposes. I'll go into the details regarding the parking supply, but in looking at this application, the building size, the uses as contemplated, and the scale, not to mention the parking, it allows for additional space on the property, an actual increase in pervious coverage, and being able to utilize it in a better way. So this is the fourth sheet of the slide deck or Exhibit A1. And what this is showing, this is a colorized version of the site plan sheet submitted to the board. What it's doing is showing some color relative to where the buildings are, where the parking is, and then layering on top of that the landscaping as proposed. And this is still oriented in the same direction. We have Canfield Road as indicated on the left-hand side and Madison Avenue as indicated on the bottom of the page. So the proposed structure, now that you can see better without the blue turned on, is that of everything that has white coloring. And again, just for the board's reference, for any public listening, I'll circle the Abbey to be restored along the left-hand side or that south side, and then move closer towards Canfield as you have the center portion of the building and then the additional retail wing. In addition, when we look at the proposed site design, a lot of it does remain consistent with the original application. When we think about the size, now granted, previously we were seeking approval for 148 restaurant seats and over 50,000 square feet of retail. That's comprised of both indoor and outdoor retail. The application before you this evening is comprised of 76 restaurant seats and a total of 36,799 square feet of retail. So for comparative purposes, I know we mentioned the building size does get a little smaller. There's a retail component. You'll note in between the buildings themselves that I'll circle again with the cursor just for reference. These are exterior plaza areas or furniture gardens where the retail space can or those using the retail space can seamlessly transition from an indoor to an outdoor viewing. But it does count towards the density. It does count towards the parking demand. It does count towards the utility demand. So with the building becoming smaller, with them becoming concentrated on the center of the property, those spaces as well reduce. From a building size perspective, the building coverage is reduced by over 5%, but again, we're balancing the other site elements that go into how this density has come down. The Abbey structure, as mentioned, will be maintained, the western wing wall to be removed, or consistent with the redevelopment plan. The building, as a result, becomes set back further, both from Canfield Road and that of the southern property line. From Canfield Road, it's now over 90 feet, where it was approximately 49. And from the southwestern property line, it's now approximately 52 or 51.7 feet pulled off of that property line. The front yard setback, we are seeking, consistent with the previous application, we're seeking a deviation for the front yard setback of the Abbey. Now, I'm sure you're thinking to yourself, have they moved it? Do they contemplate moving it? We certainly do not. The redevelopment plan called for 120 feet for that front yard setback as the project transitioned into obtaining survey and then increasing the level of survey detail related to the facade intricacies. The front yard setback, as being pursued, is a little more precise, and that front yard setback is 118.2 feet. You'll note the previous application had 118.8 8 feet. Again, no change to the design of the Abbey in terms of the location, but for the record, there is a deviation associated with that. From an access standpoint, the driveway location as it exists on Madison Avenue will remain in the exact location. Again, under DOT jurisdiction, that will stay as is. Again, for the board's reference, I'll just use the cursor in conjunction with this presentation, provided everyone can see it, that you can enter the property from Madison Avenue and then circle in that, or you can head right or move. It will move in a counterclockwise direction. Another revision to the proposed development is that there are 90-degree parking spaces immediately in front of the building. Where there was previously a motor court and the building was slightly larger, there are now 90-degree parking spaces with a focus on the ADA being in that forefront, right in front of the building. As we continue in that counterclockwise direction, there is entry off of Canfield, the first of 2 driveways. The driveways remain unchanged from the previous application, but I know there was a question regarding access and the directionality, both from the public and the traffic review letter. The first driveway from Canfield, you can enter. It is restricted to right turn only out or encouraged based on the geometry of it. As you continue in that counterclockwise direction, you do have additional perimeter parking in that Canfield front yard. Again, the building is pulled back, so there's an opportunity to provide more parking here. It is screened with hedges. But again, as we continue up in this location, that is another change to the application. The second Canfield driveway, as I continue up the page, this was previously denoted for deliveries. Again, restricting or limiting those egressing from the property to right turns headed towards Madison as opposed to further southwest on Canfield Road. And then as you continue around, there are additional parking behind the back of the building, the drive aisle. This is where any deliveries would occur, where the utilities are concentrated. There is some parking here. There are EV chargers to support the requirement from the application. But the perimeter condition in this southern corner, the main difference is the tandem parking. The tandem is taken out as an opportunity. As a result, any development, any pavement, any vehicular traffic is pulled further away from that property line. And then you continue closing the gap on the counterclockwise circulation with the additional parking. This property line, generally speaking, remains the exact same as the original approval with the 90-degree parking. From a proposed parking standpoint, in terms of how many are required based on the adjustment to the use itself, 105 spaces are required based on those 76 seats and the retail square footage as mentioned. There are 108 spaces being proposed. We do note on the site plan, the black and white site plan that was submitted to the board, both vertical 90-degree drive aisles, and I'll circle one to the south of the building, and I'll circle the other closer to Canfield Road. They do indicate 19 parking spaces vertically on either side of the drive aisle, which is incorrect. There are 18 as counted, as noted in the traffic review letter, and when added to all the other parking on the proposed site plan, it does summate to 108. It's just those, we'll call it 4 rows of 19, as indicated, should say 18. In addition, EV spaces are required based on the supply. They're not counted towards any of the parking compliance, so this application is compliant from a parking standpoint, even independent of EV parking. Access, as mentioned, full circulation throughout the site. That has not changed as it relates to the application with two-way traffic. The driveway locations have not changed either. The frontage under existing conditions or under the proposed conditions consistent with the redevelopment plan, there is a land taking or a widening on Canfield, which is indicated on the site plans and will be incorporated. In addition, sidewalks, they remain consistent on the plan as originally designed, ensuring that people can get to the property safely and from their vehicles. And you'll note the Abbey, as I mentioned, lifted off the ground ever so slightly under existing conditions. What the design strives to do is level the existing building with that of the proposed building. So there are ramps with handrails for ADA compliance to ensure that access path. I mentioned the outdoor furniture gardens, and I'll circle with my cursor again. These are the pockets in between the buildings. There are 4 locations, or 2 larger locations on either side, and then 4 smaller locations that I'll circle again with the cursor in between the 2 building, or the Abbey and that of the new building. In entirety, it's 7,303 square feet of exterior furniture space that goes towards retail. And again, what that does, or how that supports the use, is that if you were on the property for the purpose of the retail or the store showings, what you can do is you can move in and out. There will be exterior furniture displays complementing that of the retail use specifically. The finished materials in the furniture garden, hedging remains a primary feature of the landscaping that's consistent with the previous approval. The finished materials will be of the stone pavers. There will be a decomposed granite aggregate in between there, landscaping hedge. Additionally, in these areas on either end, there will be a fireplace for aesthetic environment out there. The redevelopment plan does detail very specifically the design for the exterior space or the furniture gardens, consistent with the original approval back from 2021. Since the more recent amendment and consistent with this design, there are some elements that are not being proposed. Again, previously removed were that of climbing vine walls or trellises. Additionally, water walls in this area are not part of this proposed application, nor were they previously, but we do require a deviation for them. The only other revision relative to the redevelopment plan for exterior spaces is in the front motor court. As you drive in off of Madison Avenue, there is the motor court located immediately in front of the building, where previously there was a fountain. That's no longer being proposed. It is a flush stone paver. It'll be of that aesthetic for drop-offs, but again, given the revision that people are parking themselves, there's a focus on safety from a pedestrian standpoint. From a stormwater standpoint, the approach remains similar with the original application, but what has transpired since we were last here is that the rules have changed. So this project, just based on the sheer size of it, constitutes what's called a major development, where you're required to meet for water quality standpoint, water quantity, and then groundwater recharge where applicable. So in this case, we do have new motor vehicle surface. We do have disturbance exceeding 1 acre. And so what we're doing is we are slowing down the water. Under existing conditions or prior conditions, there was a large parking lot. None of that water was being treated for motor vehicle surface or for oils from your car. Under the proposed conditions, we are going to meet all the state requirements, and then based on the more recent rules, we're actually treating for the current rainfall event and those predicted in 2100. So it's even more stormwater that we're designing for, and then we're slowing down to improve the conditions that exist today. And the way that we're doing that is through a combination between porous pavement systems and some of the driveway and some of the parking areas, and then that of an above ground bioretention basin. From a lighting perspective, again, very consistent with the previous application, where there's perimeter, downward facing, dark sky compliant LED light poles. That's for a safe illuminance of any drive aisles or parking areas. All of the parking does comply with the ordinance. And then from an illumination standpoint, additionally, as you get closer to the buildings, there are ground mounted bollards for the purpose of supporting safe pedestrian circulation. The only deviation related to lighting that we are seeking, again, consistent with the previous approval, is that of building lighting, where it should be predominantly or primarily focused on facade lighting in the form of sconces. The proposed lighting design does have some bollard lighting nearby, some uplighting, varying sources that do not have a negative impact from a lighting perspective, but is not exactly mimicking that of the redevelopment plan. Utilities, all of the utilities, similar with the last application, the new building, the restored Abbey, they'll all require new utilities. The previous application, working closely with the board professionals, advanced a lot of these approvals pretty far with that higher density. Of course, we will have to work with them to obtain any amendments to those approvals, but knowing that the density has come down, that process is very clear. And I'll end with that of retaining walls and signage. So the signage for this application, the only change for signage is that where signs were located at every entryway, most of which on an entry pillar or structure, they're now going to be reduced by 2. And I know the redevelopment plan talks about monument signs. They talk about signage type. I'll be consistent in my testimony as to how it was explained to the board. And of course, if the board planner asks for any clarifications relative to them being walls or signs, I'll certainly elaborate on it. So from a signage standpoint, there is one monument sign, and I will again circle with the cursor. This is right at that northern point of the property. So the monument sign is as it was always, or it was originally designed, facing the intersection of Madison and Canfield. The monument sign in terms of height is compliant. In terms of that of the overall length, it's somewhat angled. So you'll notice I'm going to just zoom into this corner for the purpose of showing this a little bit more clearly. You'll notice there's a front face and that it does angle backwards. So we are seeking relief, again, consistent with the original application, related to the overall length of the sign when it is based on the facing of it. So the height of the sign, 6 feet or 6 feet maximum is permitted. The width of the sign, there's an 8-foot center as it faces the front, and then comprised of the entirety of the sign, if you were to lay it flat, it would be approximately 23 feet in length. So we'll zoom out just to cover the other signage, but you'll notice the symbology. This is a placard sign that is on a brick-faced masonry monument sign mounted to the ground, or mounted with a foundation to the ground. In addition, we do have vehicle entry signs. So at Madison Avenue, there are similarly 2 pillars that are on either side of the driveway. That's consistent. Again, none of this has changed, but just to refresh everyone's memory. These 2 pillars do have placard signs on them. As we move to Canfield, there is one pillar or rectangular-like pillar sign that has a placard sign on it as well. And then as we move to Canfield, there's another single placard sign on a brick masonry structure, where previously there were 2 in this location. So as it relates to vehicular entry signs, there is 1 less than previously being proposed. Or 2 less, let me clarify. 2 less than previously proposed. Again, this is this is for also signed as deliveries only at this Canfield entrance. As we move closer to the building, in terms of signage, there are entry signs. Those are similar. They're the same placard sign, which is a same placard sign, which is a cast stone plaque. They are on 2 pillars that provide entry to the furniture gardens. There are 2 to the north of the restaurant, there are 2 to the south of the restaurant, and there are 2 at the main entrance of the building. And finally, the facade sign, there is 1 facade sign above the main entrance. It's attached to that of the canopy or the extension from the building itself that is affixed to the building. From a relief standpoint, the number of signs, we are seeking relief from the number of entry signs, 6 being proposed, where 4 is permitted in the redevelopment plan. Again, in terms of the proposed design from a site engineering standpoint, this does conclude my direct testimony. I know the signage may be a little convoluted, though very consistent with the original application. So I'm happy to answer any questions as it relates to the design, as it relates to anything the board or the board professionals may have.
Well, I have a few questions. You've mentioned, what is the comparison of the fraction of impervious surface with this compared to the original and as approved in 2022 and now?
So I can get you the two more recent, and if you give me
Okay,
one
well,
second, I'll get you the
that's-
third.
That's fine.
But since the most recent approval, the impervious coverage is being reduced by approximately 7,000 square feet.
Okay. The other question was, you mentioned the stormwater management and the bioretention basin. Is that the rain garden that's referred to in the back where was the tandem parking?
Yes, so this will also, I'll use my cursor just to circle the area that is in the rear. There are, similar to a rain garden, there are breaks in the curb that allow for stormwater to enter.
And I think it's listed on the landscape plan as a rain garden with a Ernst Company seed mix of something or other. I can't remember, but okay. But that is what you're referring to is back there.
That is the bioretention,
Okay.
yes.
Okay. Yeah, back here. Any other questions?
So, I'm sorry, on that bioretention, does that mean that you're not pumping water into it, or by gravity flow into the basin?
Correct, it is by gravity flow for the
Oh,
purpose of filtering through that at-grade material to treat it, and then it is being eventually conveyed out to the Canfield system.
I see. Okay, thank you.
I just have a couple of clarifying questions, if I may. And they're on different subjects, so I'm going to bounce around a little bit. The outdoor retail space, is that all season retail space? So it'd be all 4 seasons, but uncovered? Is that correct?
Yes, so in our galleries that have inclement weather, our intent is to make sure that you can see the furniture. Obviously, in times of snow and things of that nature, we do our best to keep them clear, but our intent is that people can see our furniture here.
Okay.
It does not get removed by season.
Okay, and it's uncovered?
Correct.
Uncovered.
Covered at night, open during the day.
Okay, my second question, I was not clear when you said right turn only onto Canfield. Was that from both entrances or just from the one in front?
For the Canfield driveways?
Yeah, there's 2 Canfield driveways.
Yes, and I will zoom in just to address your question. In working, apologies, I'm just going to flatten this so it stops moving as I do. No change to the document, just a little tech complication here. Both of them are designed with geometry that suggests a right turn. So I believe it's signed and it's encouraging that vehiculars turn right towards Madison Avenue.
On both driveways?
On both driveways off of Canfield.
And signage will support that instruction for drivers?
Yes, that's consistent with the original application.
And that's unchanged from as approved, right?
Correct.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure because I wasn't sure if you were talking about just the front one or both of them. The final question was, can you repeat the reason for removing the back wing, the ruins, as we called it back in the day?
I think, unfortunately, I do think that would be better suited for the architect to address.
Okay, thank you. I'll hold that. That's it for now.
Mr. Abbott.
Just a quick question on the EV charging. I see 5 spaces there and 2 EV chargers. Is that those 2 little black rectangles? I guess those are the charging stations. Oh, let me turn my mic on so others can hear me. Those are the charging stations up on the upper left-hand corner, I guess on the south corner.
Yeah.
So there's 5. So there's 2 EV chargers going to service 5 spaces.
So I think, again, good question. As indicated, it is showing them on either side of parking spaces. The intent is that there will be a charge for all spaces as required.
All 5. All 5 spaces. Okay, and will there be?
I believe you're only required 4. So, and you have two station chargers that would feed that. The middle, that middle one is probably not. Some cars might be able to reach, but there's only 4 cables.
Well, can I get some clarification on that?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so, yeah, and apologies for.
So the middle space is not for charging?
Not intended.
Correct. So there will be 2 to service 2 spaces each.
Okay, thank you. And will there be any, so somebody coming in off Madison Avenue Will they be directed, if they're driving an EV, will they be directed to the spots where EV charging stations can be found, or is it kind of hunt and search for them?
I don't think there's any signage for EV proposed at this time, but we'll certainly work with the board to ensure that that is made clear.
Yeah, this way, someone coming in with an EV that, can do a little top off, can see where in the parking lot the stations are located. Thank you. That's it for now.
Mr. Lesso.
I have a couple of questions. And this, I'm not really sure if the engineer can answer, the director of construction. How many employees are going to be at the site when you're at, let's say, full capacity? In terms of operations?
I can't hear him.
Jane?
He's not using his mic.
Being told there's usually about 30 to 35 for the gallery and about 50 for the restaurant.
So you'll have 85 employees in addition to the guests that you're inviting to use the facility.
Approximately, but they won't all be working at one time.
Well, I'm asking how many will be working at one time?
Excuse me, can you use the microphone, please?
Oh, yes.
You wish her to inform the witness where he spoke or to testify as an additional witness, Counselor? Same first part. Do we have another witness coming on, or is she providing that information to the?
Just let us come up and introduce yourself and your address.
Or right here.
Yeah, and then, and tell everybody. That's good.
Hi, I'm Jane Cipollini. I am the Senior Vice President of Galleries on the East Coast. So I have a gallery on the East Coast.
Can't hear you. We can't hear you.
Oh, you can't hear me?
Yeah.
I'm Jane Cipollini. I'm the Senior, is it not on?
I don't think it's on. And Joe, we can't hear you either. Is your microphone on?
No, it is.
Oh, okay. I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah, come and use this.
Thank you.
I don't need the
I'm Jane Cipollini. I'm the Senior Vice President of Galleries for the East Coast for RH.
And the business address, if you could, please?
It would be 15 Koch Road, it's the same.
That's fine. And I swore you in earlier, correct? You were part of the group that was sworn?
I believe so.
Okay. If
Yes.
you stood and raise your right hand, then we're good.
Okay. So the
Yes.
question was how many at any given time?
Yeah, I'm trying to ascertain how much parking.
Yeah.
If you're not familiar with me, I'm the guy that voted against it twice. I think the project is too big for the location. There's not enough parking. So
Yeah.
I'm trying to, you've made it smaller, which I think is fantastic, but now I'm trying to understand if really there is enough parking.
Sure. It depends on the time of day. So I would tell you on
Saturday, Sunday.
approximately, you're probably looking at 20 to 30 gallery associates and probably, I'm going to say 40 restaurant.
And where do you expect those 65 people to park?
A lot of them, some do public transportation, some live nearby. So, and some will park.
Right, but the people that live nearby are going to drive, right? They're not going to walk there.
Correct.
So do you have a guess of how many people you think are going to park?
I do not.
Okay. Right, thank you.
You're welcome.
My next,
If there's any other board questions on operations, since we have this witness, if anyone has any questions on operations now?
so this now goes back to the engineer. So in the original approval, I believe there was like 170 parking spaces, and of those 170, it was 175. And you were filling 60 of them by renting space at the next door building. Now, the building's got a little bit smaller, so I guess what happens is less restaurant seats means there's less parking required, and the smaller footprint, I'm not sure what the calculation is, a planner probably knows, but you're now allowed less parking. So the question I have is, you have 108, you went from 170 to 108 by shrinking the building and by reducing the seats. But the tandem spaces are gone, and you're not using any off-site parking. I'm just, yes?
That's correct, yeah.
Is there any, again, I guess this is maybe again in operations, when you're at your busiest, what happens when people start parking on the street or parking in the office buildings next door? How do you police that?
Yeah, I mean, typically not our responsibility to, police neighboring properties. Obviously, with an operation like this, we'll go ahead and like in any of our operations, we make sure we have great relations with our neighbors. If there's an issue that comes up, we obviously address it. But from a day-to-day patrolling and having this place completely full, that's not something that we go around and police across the street and such. And from our experience in terms of total capacity, we are a business that we operate, as I said, 23 restaurants across the globe. It is very, very rare that we have 100% capacity inside of our restaurants, whereby we space out our reservations to ensure capacity. We don't want people waiting. As designed, we don't have space for people to sit and wait in queue. We don't have a stand-up bar or sit-down bar. So we're dissimilar to a lot of restaurants that actually want people to come and stand in queue. So we generally space out our reservations to accommodate appropriately.
Thank you. No more questions.
Yes, Mr. Quillen. I have a couple of questions about signage and about parking.
My apologies. Do you mind repeating the question?
Can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
I have questions about signage and about parking. The monument sign that's at the north corner, could you just repeat what the length of that would be and how that compares to the ordinance and the prior plan?
Certainly. So as it relates to the prior plan, it is consistent. The monument sign has not changed. As it relates to the ordinance, the monument sign, again, this is the one in the northern corner, as at that intersection. The monument sign is approximately 6 feet high. So in terms of height relative to the ordinance, or that being a retaining wall or structure in the front yard, it is compliant relative to Canfield. The length of the sign, as it relates to the ordinance, it does exceed it. So the overall length of the sign, again, if you were to lay it flat, knowing there's a front and then there are two wing walls, if you will, is approximately 23 feet in length.
And what is this length of the central section and what are the lengths of the wings?
So I will, I'm just going to transition to the detail because I think it will show it a little bit better. And this is as submitted to the board previously. So this is drawing C16. It's part of the site plan set that was submitted to the board and dated November 22nd, 2024. So this is the monument sign, just for the board's reference, where the center or that front facing before it works backwards into the page is approximately 8 feet. And then that as split between the remaining is 5 or so feet remaining on either side.
Okay, and did you say that in 2022, the approval was for an identical monument sign?
It was, yes.
Okay. And then I have a question about, and I think this is a question for Mr. Slade, about the location. This is something that perhaps I brought up in 2022. I don't remember. If the roadway were to be relocated to line up with the roadway on the other side of Madison Avenue, is that still something that's under active consideration or something that we should be trying to reserve the possibility of in the future?
The right-of-way dedication is being provided by RH in order to facilitate that. And there's been ongoing discussions between the police department and the state on advancing that project to actually complete the construction for the realignment.
So
nothing, concrete as far as dates go, but there's further discussions.
So RH is providing a right-of-way?
Yes.
And the sign is in the right-of-way?
No. If you look.
Yeah, I'll flip back.
Exhibit, you'll see there's a big lawn area. That triangle is where the dedication has occurred for the future realignment.
Okay, there's more land on the other side. Okay, all right, thank you. And then with respect to parking, I wanted to ask about the parking across the front of the building and how that compares to the 2022 approval. What did that parking look like in the 2022 approval?
So the parking in front of the building on the Madison Avenue side, the previous application had parking spaces along the perimeter of the motor cart where the building did not have parking adjacent to it, and now it is being proposed with 90-degree parking spaces in front.
I'm sorry, how many? 9?
The row of 90-degree parking spaces in front.
Okay. And that includes some general parking spaces right across from the entrance, the Madison Avenue entrance. They're not disabled parking spaces. They're just general use parking spaces. Is that right?
There are parking spaces on either side. So there's a motor cart that you would drive through, and then the parking is on the right-hand side of that and the left-hand side of that.
And one more question that I have on an unrelated subject is, you referred at least once to the main entrance to the building. What entrance is that?
As a civil engineer, I speak to the front of the building, knowing that the Abbey main entrance is off of this Madison Avenue drive aisle, as is that of the lobby as you move your way towards Canfield, or this front-facing wall. I'll let the architect speak to the internal relation to the building, but there are main entrances on the exterior of these 3 walls.
So you were talking about entry signage next to the main entrance. Do you recall saying that?
Yes, that would be the entrance of the proposed building immediately adjacent to the Abbey.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Yes.
That was it.
Could I just wanted to speak briefly to Mr. Alesso's parking question, which is a good one. And I believe you also had parking concerns in the first 2 goers rounds, which is why we have a post-construction parking study that we agreed to do. And so we do comply with the ordinance for, or the redevelopment plan for parking, both for the restaurant and the retail. Nonetheless, there was some hesitation or concerns about how this all is actually going to play out. And so for that reason, and this probably will catch any of the maybe neighboring property. I mean, all this is going to be considered when we do our post-construction parking survey. And so we'll be able to come back if there's a problem with the parking supply. And we may have to go off-site again, who knows? But for now, we're confident that we can park it all on site. But we do know there is the ability both across the street and potentially next door, should we have to do satellite parking. But we are going to study it, and we're going to report back to you guys.
Yes, Mr. Lesso.
Just as a comment.
Your mic.
Yeah, so I appreciate that. My concern still is that you're not going to have enough parking. You've scaled down the project, so it looks more like it now fits on the property. I want you to be successful. Believe me, I want you to be successful. The last thing I want to see is you not be successful, and then we have an eyesore on the corner. So I want you to be successful. I'm just concerned that you don't have enough parking when you have what could be 45 employees on a Saturday or a Sunday, and they didn't, if you're successful, you're going to fill up your parking lot.
Yeah, and there's, I tell people this all the time when you have a business that's new and that you want to succeed. If we have a parking problem, we have a problem in general. So yeah, we have the greatest interest in making the parking work. And so we'll do our best, and, we'll see how it goes. I appreciate the question though. I heard the numbers too, so I know where you're going.
Mr. Robbins, you got another question?
Yes, just following up on my colleague's question about the post-construction traffic study. When does that take place after you open?
So I know that it's laid out in the approval. I don't have it right in front of me, but I can have since there's been a couple questions about parking, and we do have our parking and traffic person here. And so in the interim, I'll have him get more detail for you on the study. I believe it was 6 months or a year, but I can't say for sure.
Typically,
yeah.
with businesses, opening days, opening months is
Right.
always everybody wants to see what's new and exciting in town, and then everything kind of levels off to a,
Right.
you know, to a normal. So I'm just curious as to when that follow-up would be.
Yes, and we'll get the exact timing for you, Mr. Rabbits. Thank you.
I had one more parking question. I read 6 months. Thank you.
I'm sorry to
No.
word it out, with the chair's permission, I did just cross-reference the original approval back in 2021, I think. Condition 6, page 31, references the obligation of the post-construction parking analysis, aka parking audit, corresponds to the requirements and parameters set forth actually in the redevelopment plan itself. So it was contemplated back from the beginning, I guess, so to speak. Section 3E4, which provides several things, including a time frame. Parking count shall be conducted beginning 6 months after the opening of the facility and shall occur during the course of the ensuing 6 months. So that's the specifics for the board to have that information to contemplate at this time.
Thank you.
Yeah, one more parking question. This is EV related. It was mentioned, I think you're required to have the 4 EV ready spaces, and you have 4 EV spaces. But I believe there's also a requirement for 1 accessible EV ready space, and I didn't see that anywhere on the plans.
Yes, and the applicable requirement, previously the supply triggered 5% and then 5% of that to be ADA. The minimum of 1 to be ADA as designed will comply with.
Is that an additional one, or?
As part of that sample, that 1 would be ADA.
Oh, okay, so is one of those 4 spaces?
We will supply one of the 4 spaces as ADA.
Okay.
If I may though,
Yes.
and we'll be able to do that, speak to the engineer, of course, without losing one of the proposed spaces, or would we be losing that 5th space in the middle of the 2 EV spaces that is not an EV space?
So the exact location of it, we'll work with the board professionals. It's not anticipated to impact the parking supply, but the exact location for that ADA spot, we'll work with the board professionals on.
So they can still count on the same number of spaces, even if the same number of spaces is 1 or 2 more than what you believe is required.
Yes, they are 108.
Yeah.
108, yeah.
Parking supply as proposed this evening,
Right.
even in conjunction with converting 1 to be ADA, it will remain unchanged.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
This might be more expansive than just your testimony, but could you go over any variants or deviations that are proposed herein that were not already approved
So
2 years ago?
yeah, so our planner will enumerate those for you.
Okay, thank you.
And if I may, on that, would board members be able to look at they got the notice, right, Sonia? They got copies of the notice, right?
Notice of,
The notice for this hearing. There's a list of several items laid out as to what the changes are in a list format. In the
Yes.
notice, I think.
Yeah.
We don't get that.
we don't get that.
No, we have, yeah.
I have that.
Yeah.
Never
So
mind.
just so, and to preview the planner's testimony, about 40% or so are pre-existing. And so about half are new. And so I told the planner to focus on the new ones. Although,
Right.
He'll still touch on the other ones. We want to stress the ones that change from the blast approval.
We'll hear from the planner.
Yes, you will.
Mr. Slade, Mr. Phillips? Any?
I do have a question in regard to curbing. I believe you're showing curbing along the frontage of Canfield Road. I don't know, I don't think that's there now, but that's proposed, is my recollection.
That's correct.
I did not see on the new plan curbing along Madison Avenue, and that may have been an oversight, but curbing should go in along the frontage of Madison Avenue, just it protects people on the sidewalk, for that new sidewalk that's going in the front. Is that, I guess my question would be, is that something the applicants want to complete? I think it may be in the prior conditions, I'm not 100% sure.
Canfield roadside is definitely no curving. only on the.
I'm sorry, we got.
Yet another.
Well,
You know what?
No.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, but so they're gonna provide it now.
we'll
is
work
the
with you
answer.
regarding the
We'll provide
proposed
the curbing,
frontage, yes.
sure.
Thank you.
Mr. Phillips, or Jim, anything else?
No, it's.
Okay.
I do have
Yeah, Mr. Warner?
one or two, if neither of my colleagues to my right or left have.
I do, but you can go first.
No, please. That's okay, either way. I appreciate applicant's counsel for leading into it by referencing prior conditions. I think the applicant can stipulate to all prior conditions the same, to the extent same would not be inconsistent with what may be approved this evening.
Yes.
Okay. And specifically, in addition to that auditing, I just wanted to remind the board and the applicant members of the public that there's a post-occupancy noise audit. That was one of the conditions of our prior approval, as well as an endeavor to retain 100% of the existing leaded and stained glass windows installed at the Abbey in conjunction with the Historic Preservation Commission, as well as many others. So I didn't want to lose sight to that, and thank you, Vitola, for the applicant's continued stipulation to all those conditions that are not inconsistent with the potential approval this evening. Yes. You're on, Mr. Phillips.
Mr. Phillips.
Can you confirm that there's no reductions in the width of any of the perimeter buffers that abut single-family residential, or any changes in the landscaping that was previously approved and/or constructed?
So I can confirm that at the minimum width as proposed previously for a landscape buffer is being maintained. It's being increased in some locations beyond that.
Correct, particularly in where the tandem parking was.
Exactly.
Correct, okay. Also, I just want to be clear on the signage, and this got a little sort of complicated at the last meeting because the redevelopment plan spelled out, there were sections on fences and walls and signage and monument signs, and you kind of did a little bit of a hybrid, if you will, with the pillars and so forth. So rather than to get into the weeds on all of that, as I understand your testimony, that you're not looking for anything more in terms of the deviations from signage other than what was previously approved, or you're actually lessening the amount or size of the signage. Do I have that right?
That's correct.
Thank you. The only other thing is, at some point, I don't know if it's now or at the end, I'd just like to make a comment on the parking. Now a good time? Or?
Yes, that's what sure.
All right, so I have to say, when we drafted the redevelopment plan, one of the things that we really struggled with was coming up with a parking standard. We didn't know, I don't think anybody knows, the applicant's admitting in some respects that they don't know. You go to standard sources in the planning literature and ITE and Urban Land Institute and so forth. It's an idiosyncratic use. You can find a standard for a furniture store, which is a pretty low standard. You can find a standard for a restaurant. This is a combination. It can be very popular. As Mr. Ravitz indicated, it's probably going to be very popular during the grand opening phase. And we didn't want to underpark. We didn't want to overpark. So we tried to find a balance. And we came up what we thought was the most reasonable standard when this was a larger project, both in terms of the number of restaurant seats and the square footage of retail. And they couldn't provide it all on site, which is why they had to go across the street for that extra cushion of parking. And we didn't even know whether that was going to be enough. So that's why we instituted in the redevelopment plan the monitoring. And as you might, if you read my TCC report, I did not have a lot of comments other than go through the plan with regard to compliance and what was approved, which they've done, and I think their plan will also do, and I've done. And the other recommendation was we still wanted that post-construction monitoring study, notwithstanding the fact that they technically now meet the parking standard. I don't think anybody knows what it's going to be like. We did the best we could. I share Mr. Alesso's concern. We struggle with this from day one. And we tried to come up with the right balance. And again, notwithstanding the fact that now they technically meet the redevelopment plan standard,
I don't think anybody knows whether it's going to be sufficient, it's too much or too little. And that's why I think the fair reconciliation is continue to do the 6-month post-construction monitoring. So that's my comment on the parking.
Thank you, Mr. Phillips.
You're welcome.
Any questions of this witness, these witnesses, actually, from the public? Yes. Please name and address.
Hey, everybody. Dan Conley, 47 Crescent Drive. Actually just moved in May to Morristown, so happy to be here. Thanks, council.
Welcome.
To speak. Really appreciate the information. I only have like 12, 14 questions on parking. I do like share some of the concerns and the discussion, not concerns, but discussion, like parking is important. Mr. Alesso, I definitely, your comment, I started to picture cars outside of my address at Crescent Drive, and definitely don't want that. So definitely recognize the importance of the parking. I want to shift to lighting though, and I obviously wasn't here for the original approval. I've tried to find as much of the documents as I can online. I would love all the packets. I don't know if citizens can get that, but I would love to take a look. But you mentioned the lighting. I think sconces were mentioned. You also mentioned bollard lighting. I wonder if you could just talk a little bit about what the lighting is going to look like, particularly on the west side. I think I'm lot 4, so I'm right here. Really, what I'm concerned with, like, what is the lighting on the building going to look like, and then what is it going to be like in the parking lot? I'm hoping it's not, kind of like bright fluorescent streetlights up above the parking lot. But just wondering about that.
It's a good question. The lighting, the site lighting that I can speak to, so the site lighting, especially along the perimeter, it's all going to be downward facing, meaning it's directing light downward. In terms of the illumination levels, they're low for the purpose of security levels, but not exceeding ordinance standards. What that means is as we get to the property line, especially with the landscaping buffer, the sound buffer that was previously installed, it won't spill beyond the property line. So where you live, where the neighbors to the southwest live, the foot candles as measured will not exceed 0.
What's the warmth of it? I know it's a weird question. Is it like bright or?
So the temperature expressed in Kelvin is 2,700. When we think about that scale, we think about a holiday decor light that's very blue is 4,000. So it'll be much warmer than that.
Okay, that's helpful. And then I have another question. On the parking lot itself, is it blacktop asphalt or is it like cobblestone? Like what is the actual surface?
It'll be it will be paved, but a portion of it will be porous pavement for the purpose of stormwater improvements.
Okay, it's like asphalt.
A porous, yeah, it will appear similar to asphalt. When it rains, the water is going into the ground as a difference.
Okay. Just where I'm going for the council is obviously the paving itself. I, again, am right over the hedge line, so thinking about that, I've got a couple, 2 young daughters, and obviously this smell of asphalt, not pleasant, is what it is. Also thinking about the heat.
Sir, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but
Yeah.
with the chair's permission,
I'm sorry.
the procedure may be new as well for you, so I want to help. You will have an opportunity to give all public comment you wish to, give at the end of the proceedings, but we're supposed to stick to the questions now.
You got it.
Thank you.
All right, I think those are my relevant questions. I'll have some more probably.
I would point out the site plan itself, at least somewhat up-to-date version, is available on the website. That has, and I know specifically it does have the lighting plan on there with the proposed foot candle measurements and all that. It's it's a huge PDF document. It takes a while to get to look through, but it is there.
I was digging for it. I'll keep digging.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah, Mr. Alesso.
Can I just ask a question, maybe of Mr. Warner? Just and maybe.
Sorry, just a question of Mr. Warner. I know that in the past site plans, we've allowed or we've asked for lights to be shut off at a certain time. And I'm just wondering if there was anything in there that so that the homeowners nearby, that if they're concerned about it, I believe that we allow for certain lights to be shut off 10 o'clock at night, 11. I don't know if they stipulated to anything, or I don't remember.
I'm going to ask applicant's
The
counsel.
ragu commercial, it's in there. Yeah, we do shut them off.
It's security level lighting. We have a, let's see. Oh, strike that. That's off-site parking, which is no longer applicable. But does anybody know offhand?
Yeah, I think, go ahead.
The shut-off time?
Yeah.
My recollection is it's a half hour after they close for the purpose of employees to leave safely.
And it goes down to security level lighting 1/2 hour after closing?
Yes.
That's for safety purposes, of course.
Isn't that in the resolution?
It was in the former approval.
I think it's in. Yeah, I'm just having trouble finding.
Is that the only lighting
Oh, here we are.
that's going to be on 24/7? Is the security lighting?
I mean, the concern during the testimony was any lighting in the parking lots around the building.
Right.
And that will all be, whether or not there's a light on in the building itself,
We gotta turn off our lights.
so all the lights in the building go off.
We're not in the business of funding the electric company.
No. Apparently, my family is. Condition 14 of the original approval, all lighting shall be reduced to security level lighting 1 hour, so my apologies, as well as apologies from others. 1 hour after the closing of the gallery restaurant on the property, the details of same to be subject to the review and approval of the township engineer. So he's monitoring.
We expect to see you there.
I'll be up to the last drink.
Public transportation.
Okay, I
It's
guess
the
we're.
battle to the bottom and I'm losing.
That'll be your next witness, I guess. Yes, thank you very much. No, I'm fine. Wait a second, Mr. Ravis has to step out for a minute while we move ahead.
We got the same. Okay, Mr. Chairman, we're now call our architect, Russell McCallum.
Yes, Russell Pacala. I'm with Spillman Farmer Architects, 720 Spillman Drive in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania.
I'm sorry, I apologize.
Sorry.
But we're going to wait for
Yes.
Representative Rabbit to come
Yeah,
back with the testimony.
he's back.
He's back.
Here we are. Want to make sure everyone's qualified here.
Yes.
With us. Okay.
Cal, can you please give the board the benefit of your education, your training, and qualifications?
Okay, I'm Russell Pacala. I'm a registered architect in Pennsylvania and New Jersey. I work with Spillman Farmer Architects of Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, 1720 Spillman Drive. I've been practicing architecture for 40 years or so in all capacities of institutional, retail, multifamily, residential, et cetera.
We would ask the board to qualify this witness as an expert in architecture.
Yeah, I'll accept his qualifications. Please continue.
All right, Mr. McCullough, please take the board through your presentation.
So, as you noticed on the site plan, we are reducing the overall size of the building. These perspectives that show the current design, I think the appropriate scale of the new additions compared to the existing Abbey, you can see the proportions, I think, are a lot more conducive to making the Abbey the focal point of the design. And as we page through these different renderings, you'll see that, especially when you come into the property, that the Abbey will sort of be the focal point of design. So again, on the left for orientation is the existing Abbey. In the middle is, we'll call that the main entrance and the restaurant sort of building. And then on the right side is the modern gallery, which is a 2-story space. And that's all consistent with the previous application. The overall concept for the new design was, again, staying with the same quality materials. We're talking about brick, stone sills, stone coping, the overall proportion and scale, keeping sort of with the vertical elements of the Abbey. The windows are vertical, the bay windows are vertical, even the corner turrets are sort of vertical. So the window fenestration on both the middle building and the 2-story modern gallery has the vertical windows, just to keep that rhythm. Also across the front plane, and as per the redevelopment, there's no one single plane that's over 50 feet. As the Abbey plane moves in and out, so does the modern gallery plane moves in and out. It's just not one flat plane. It's a little hard to read when we get to the plans. I'll show you where that sort of steps out a little bit, and the same thing with the main entrance. And then there's a main canopy that sticks out over that main entrance. Okay, that's a sort of a ground view of the front entrance. Again, gives you a little bit better idea of the height of the main entrance. Again, the main entrance is a single-story building with the 2 grand connector halls that connect to the Abbey and then to the modern 2-story gallery on the right. The next is just sort of zooming into that main entrance and the canopy that sticks out over the sidewalk to allow pedestrians to get out of a car, be dropped off at that particular entrance. The next, page 8, is the perspective as you turn in off of Madison Avenue. Again, you're sort of looking straight at the entrance to the Abbey. Now, we're calling the center building sort of the main entrance only because that's where the drop-off is, but there are entrances to all 3 buildings. The Abbey door, the modern gallery, the 2-story space, there's an entrance there as well. And then what we're calling the main entrance at the drop-off. As far as the plans, the plans are very similar to what was presented before. Again, just this gives you an idea of proportion and scale, how it's being scaled down. This is the basement plan. Again, very similar in size. The next page, page 10, is without the overlay. So the existing Abbey basement is being used for back of house. Staff member areas downstairs and any kind of small storage. There's no furniture storage, but just literature or material samples, that sort of stuff will be used in that basement area. The general public will basically not be going down to that basement area. And then in the 2-story modern gallery, there is a small mechanical basement area, and then the elevator shaft will partially go down as well, and the stair tower. If I go back one, there was a small basement area underneath the kitchen building, which is no longer needed. We go to page 11. Again, that's the overlay of the first floor, just to give you some idea of how that works. And then the functions on page 12 are basically the same. The Abbey on the left side will be gallery space on the first floor. The center part is the main entrance leading to the wine bar that then leads to the restaurant. And then the back of house, the kitchen and staff and deliveries and so forth for the restaurant will happen in the building in the back. And then on the right side is the modern gallery. That first floor is all gallery space. The next, page 13, is the second floor. And again, there's no second floor to the middle building, just the modern gallery has the second floor space that, and obviously the Abbey has the second floor gallery spaces as well. And at this point, I'll point out that, you know, the portion of the Abbey that's being demolished will be taken back to where there's a little change in the width of the building. And we're going to reconstruct the bay window that was at the far side of the of that southern part that we're demoing, repurposing the leaded and glass windows. It'll be made of the same brick as the Abbey with the corner coins and the crenellations across the coping. That's just the second floor plan. And then the roof plan, similar to the last rendition, some skylights in the middle building. The restaurant is it's an all glass roof. And then the other roofs are low slope flat roofs similar to the Abbey. And then there are some screens on the roof to screen any mechanical units that we have on the roof. Page 16 just gives you an idea of the front elevation, the difference in building height and how it's being scaled down for the front elevation and the elevation that faces Canfield. And then I really think when you look at that, when you zoom into that front elevation and
You're on the next page, right?
No, I just, correct, 17, sorry. When you zoom into that front elevation, you can kind of see the verticality of the proposed windows. And again, the proportion and scale, we're trying to keep the roof line of the new building down below the roof line of the existing Abbey. The materials, again, like I said, the brick will be a complementary color. We're not going to match the brick of the Abbey. We don't want, again, we're trying to distinguish. We're not trying to make a historic, exactly historic duplicate of the Abbey at all. So it's going to be more modern, but it'll be a brick that'll complement the colors of the Abbey. And again, a stone coping and stone sills at the doors and the windows. Any questions?
Yes.
I have a couple of questions. I want to go back to my question from before. Could you repeat again why you feel the need to remove the back wing portion that was just
There's a couple reasons. One, it was very narrow, and the other reason is that it was structurally not secure. If you ever went in there, it's barely standing up, to be honest with you. So the cost to reconstruct it and then reconstruct it and have space that's not very usable was some of the decision making into removing that, and to open up the back furniture garden with views towards that direction, so it didn't feel so confined.
So you partially answered one of my other questions, which has to do with the stained glass windows. You said you were going to move the bay window in the back up to the end of the building that you are retaining.
Yes.
Are you losing any stained glass windows at all in that removal?
I'd have to double check. There might be some smaller windows. There aren't a whole lot of windows in that west wing, especially I know facing the furniture court. There's not. I'd have to go back and take a look at that.
I will admit I have particular interest in making sure that we preserve any of those stained glass windows. So if there's anything that has to be removed, I'd like us to follow up on how we're going to protect and retain those.
Okay.
Jim.
You know the glare that I'm following up on that.
All things window related.
I think was there something in the redevelopment?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that whatever conditions we agreed to with respect to the stained glass windows on the 22 approval, we will
Yeah, I
abide by.
remember you were gonna put them in storage, which was
Yeah.
something that made my hair go on fire, so, we don't want that. We'd like to display, if there's anything that comes down that
I remember,
is
yeah.
useful and just,
Yep.
can be displayed, let's do so.
Yeah, in addition to in our 22 approval, and indeed, Mr. Slate, along with the Historic Preservation Commission, are designated as not only making sure that everything that can remain does remain, but everything that is removed is stored or preserved pursuant to their determination, meaning our engineer and the Historic Preservation.
Right, okay. And then finally, I just, when you look at the drawings, it appears that the buildings have been significantly scaled back, which from an aesthetic standpoint is a positive, and it appears to fit the lot better than what we had before. I did a calculation on your square footage, though. It looks like you're still at 95% of the original square footage. So is my calculation correct? You went from 39,730 to 37,926?
Are you talking about the footprint
I'm talking about.
or the overall
This
square
letter is
footage?
called square foot of furniture showroom space. So are you still at 95%, even though aesthetically it looks much smaller?
I'm not sure what you mean by 95%. So what was approved previously on the square footage?
I divided the two numbers and came up with 95%.
The 37,000 was further reduced.
Oh, it was further reduced?
36 and change.
Oh,
36,799, right?
okay. So what's the percentage of showroom space that you?
Showroom space?
From the 39,730 original to where you are now, how much?
Well, I don't have the 31, so the numbers I have were for the showroom. So the modern gallery is 15, and the existing Abbey was 15. So that's like 31,000. And now we're down to 10,000 and 9,900. So that's it's almost 10,000 square feet of reduction.
So I'm looking at letters that were received in December and November of '24, and looking at the numbers that are represented in those letters.
Who's the letter from them?
It was, who's this from? Stonefield.
John Cork and Matthew
Stonefield
Sackler.
is the header.
Yeah, it could be they're combining the restaurant in there, Linda. And you were talking just about the furniture gallery
Oh, well,
space.
they referenced it as
Furniture
showroom space, and then kept the restaurant as a separate item. I'm just curious to know where you ended up in the scaling of everything.
Okay, so Linda, when the planner comes up, he's gonna give you, and because he's from Snowfield, so he can give you an explanation and clarify any confusion with the numbers.
I'll hold my thoughts.
I had the same question, and I brought it up before the meeting started. And from what I understand, the letter of December 23rd superseded the letter of November 22nd. Is that right, Mr. Warner?
I believe that's correct, but I believe, again, it's referring to 36,799 of showroom space. So maybe we should await the clarification if that is showroom and restaurant as opposed to just showroom. We should wait and let the applicant clear it up for us. I'm guessing, I was guessing as to that being the answer, but I don't want to guess, and it's not for me.
Yeah. I'm sure the experts know.
I'm sure they do.
Any other questions?
Yes.
I would just say that the footprint changed from 43,000 to almost 29,000. So that's a 34% decrease in just the footprint, from the numbers I have.
So while it's all fresh in our minds, Ms. Savage,
Come on up. Why belabor this? You want to
We
explain?
have a math problem.
Yeah, the 36,799, that is the occupiable retail space for the purpose of that use. So that is also inclusive of an exterior site furnishings area.
Okay.
That's approximately 7,000. So that's independent of the seats or the space at which the restaurant seats occupy.
Right.
It's independent of any of these back of house spaces he's mentioning. And I will go so far as to clarify, I believe you're referencing a traffic statement dated November 22nd, 2024, which has been replaced with a more recent version that clarifies that
Okay,
misreference, if you will.
thank you.
Another question on the portion of the ruins. Do I recall correctly that extension, that wing of the building was not original, that was added on?
That's my understanding.
Okay, so that is not actually part of the original structure of the Abbey. It was added on later and is somewhat different anyways. Maybe why it's falling apart and the rest of it's still
There are some
standing.
different detailing to it, and I think it was for, help quarters and so forth. So not quite the same level of detail as the rest of the building.
Yeah, thank you.
And that's a really good point, because the reason why in the first iteration of the redevelopment plan, it was scheduled for demolition is it was not part of the original building. It did not fit with the historic nature of the restoration we were doing. So,
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Benmore.
I seem to recall that on the previous drawings, there was more of a parapet on the new building. I could be wrong about that. And looking at the drawings, it looks like we could see the mechanical equipment on the roof. And maybe a larger parapet would hide that more.
You're referring to which building?
The big one on the far right.
Right.
The modern, yeah.
I think there's about a 3-foot parapet.
Yeah, it's not very much.
But not, well, I think there was a 3-foot parapet. Now it's probably only like a 1-foot parapet. We were trying to bring that scale down.
Okay.
And then there's going to be a visual screen of any mechanical units up there. That's what's sort of
So there'll
shown.
be a screen beyond what's showing on the drawings.
The screen should be shown on the drawings.
Is that the screen? Okay, I can't tell.
Page 5 shows the.
Okay. I couldn't tell if it was the screen or the equipment.
Yeah, again, the screen here, there's actually a screen above the
That's the
kitchen
screen.
area as well. And the rendering that shows the mechanical units here, but if the units stick above the roof on the Abbey, there is also going to be a screen around those mechanical units.
Okay.
But until we design those units, that's to be determined.
Okay, I guess I just like the higher parapet, but I guess it is what it is. That's fine.
Any other questions? Board professionals?
No question.
Mr. Phillips?
Are you, you weren't the architect on the original, were you?
That's correct. I was not.
And the amended plan? Neither?
No, I was not.
Okay. Are you familiar with the architecture on either what was originally approved or amended?
On the amended plan.
Okay. So it seems to, and I'm doing this by recollection as well, that the architecture in terms of this plan, in terms of the design, the massing, the material treatment, the fenestration, the proportionality, seems to me to be relatively similar to what was most recently approved, which was different than the original approval. Is that fair to say?
That's fair to say, yes.
Good. We talked about the mechanicals on the roof, and you've shown that, and you do have, I think you just indicated, there is sort of an enclosure of screening on those mechanicals on the rooftop, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. What is that, can you tell us what the height of the building is now?
The 2-story modern gallery, the top of the parapet is 30 feet.
Okay. And what is it to the top of any of the mechanical screening? Because based on the redevelopment plan, that's how height is measured. I assuming you're within I think it's a 42-foot height height standard.
So on top of the 30 feet is another possibly around, well, 3'9" is on the drawing, so another possible 4 feet.
Okay.
So we're at 34 feet, sorry, 34 feet in total
Yeah.
for the two-story building.
Right, exactly. Okay. And the Abbey building, we continued the existing height in terms of the redevelopment plan, what it will allow.
Right, that's, the Abbey was about, I believe, 39 feet, I believe. Yeah.
Thank you. Can you turn to page 16? So and again, I don't recall the prior plan, but I'm looking first at the north elevation, which I think is the second one from the top. Okay. And I noticed that there is in the center, there's sort of a blank wall as opposed to where there's fenestration on either end. Was that always that way?
You're talking about this section here?
Yeah.
I believe on the previous rendition, behind the stairs leading up to the second
Staircase
floor.
Right on the interior side. Of
Right, there was windows, full height windows,
Yeah, and you removed that.
and we did remove that.
Okay.
It was problematic with regard to how the stairs went up and where the landing kind of fell halfway between. And there was a lot of concerns, how do we detail that correctly to make it look right?
So it's hard to expose that
From the
view?
From view, yes.
And then still on the north elevation, all the way toward the rear, there's also, that's like back of house for the restaurant.
Yeah, this is actually the indoor refuge area.
Okay.
Looking in the storage room, so there's no
back of house.
back of house,
Okay.
yeah.
And then can you just go down to the west elevation as well?
Okay.
Yeah, okay. And then that where there's sort of a blank wall without fenestration, that's back of house on the
Correct.
yeah, okay.
Cooking, storage, freezers.
I'm sorry? Yeah. And was that always that way in terms of no treatment or articulation of that facade?
It was, yes.
It was, okay. And then just above that, that's a screen wall, right?
Correct.
Okay, great.
And that one's, again, that parapet is at,
Higher.
yeah, higher, plus the grade's lower there. And then the screen wall. That in particular might have to be an acoustic wall, but that's to be determined at this point. And just to, if I pull over, this was the sort of redesign of that south wing that we're taking off and moving that bay window in that location. I meant to point that out earlier.
Thank you. That's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, may I?
Yes.
To Mr. Phillips' question regarding those large expanses of blank wall, is there any way to soften that with some landscaping or something that makes it a little more attractive than just?
Well, this wall here is part of the furniture garden, so they'll be planting and trees really in front. You're not going to see that.
Right. Okay.
This blank wall, I'd have to look. I believe there's some plantings, but not as intense as in the furniture garden.
Right.
Yeah, there are.
Right. Well, that's true. The parking lot trees will be. You won't see it from Canfield because of the trees that are in the parking lot.
Oh. Okay.
Maybe the best thing to do is go back to the.
Yeah, I would just look for ways to try to soften that appearance a bit somehow, some way.
Again, well, see now I'm calling myself a liar here because the parking lot is here and on this blank wall along the kitchen, and that's the refuge area. This wall here in front of the stair, there will be a hedge. There'll be these trees along that edge, so that's probably not going to be that noticeable especially as people drive by on Campfield. And then on the back, the service drive is right up against the building there. It's a little hard soften that unless we do something more vertical with landscaping.
Well, there's the berm and the trees planted along the back lot line there, so.
Yeah, again, from the neighbors, you shouldn't be able to see
Well,
that.
the neighbors won't see it because it's already blocked.
Yeah.
Ms. Murray, are you talking about potentially adding some variations to the brick wall itself, or just planning around it?
We tend to shy away from big blank expenses of walls in all of our applications. We did the same thing over at the marketplace when we talked to the developer over there. And he requested some blank walls like that, and we said, don't really like that look and feel. So I'm just throwing that out for some consideration and maybe some discussion.
Yeah, like architecturally, shadow windows and shadow doors and ways of making the brick appear as though there's really a window there when there's really not. That sort of
Just
detail
something to
type
break it
stuff.
up a little bit.
Okay. Does that sound okay to you?
Yeah, we can absolutely look at that.
So we could certainly, as a condition of this application, come up with a way to soften the blank walls, subject to the planner's review.
Thank you.
And just for my authorship of the resolution, we're talking about can we just briefly describe the two areas that in particular that we're talking about, building areas, elevation wise?
Okay.
East elevation and.
So it would be the
North
back of
west,
house
I'm sorry.
kitchen building. It would be it's going to be so we're calling it the north wall and the south wall of the kitchen building. And then we'll call gallery number, the modern gallery building, the 2-story building it'd be the north elevation at the stair tower.
Right. Elevation and stair tower. Okay, good. That gives me enough to long with. Got it.
Thank you for considering that. I appreciate it.
Some, kind of planting that's crawling up the wall or something.
I mean, I think, whatever solution I think the applicant and architect can come up with, Linda just pounced on my point when I was talking about the blank walls. Anything that's, reasonable to soften that. I don't know what the right design solution is as I sit here, and I think you've indicated you want to take the time to do it right. Take a look at it, but anything's on the table to do that.
Are there any questions from the public on this, for this witness? Yep, we have one.
Hi, my name is Adam Vincent. I'm at 71 Canfield Road. That's the cul-de-sac to the south of the Abbey. We are the neighbors who would be able to see that point wall, and would also be grateful for more information about the trees that were supposed to be put there. My understanding is that at least at one point, perhaps at the last meeting, that trees that were as tall as 30 feet were supposed to be put there, which would go a long way in helping break up that wall from our perspective, at least, as well as prevent some of the light pollution and noise pollution. Our neighbors have expressed concern about that as well.
Okay. Did you have a particular question of the
Yes, the
witness?
question is, could you talk a little bit more about the trees as well along the southern border of the property?
Yeah, well, not this witness, but our planner's coming up next, he's our last witness, and he can identify for you the trees and the areas you're asking about.
No other questions? Okay, next witness.
Mr. Chairman, we have one more witness. It's Mr. Matthew Seckler. He is our planner. He is also our traffic expert if there's any follow-on questions with regard to parking and traffic. He wears many hats. Yes.
Yes, please.
So, Mr. Seckler, why don't you please give the board the benefit of your education, training with an eye towards both traffic and planning.
Certainly, and again, it's Matthew Seckler, that's Seckler. I'm with Stonefield Engineering Design, Address is 92 Park Avenue, Rutherford, New Jersey. A Bachelor of Science in Civil Engineering from Union College. And a Master's in City Regional Planning from Rutgers University. I'm a licensed professional engineer and professional planner in the state. Also recognized professional traffic operations engineer. I've been accepted for this board and testified as a planner and traffic engineer on earlier portions of this application.
I'll accept them. Please continue.
So I'm just going to go back a couple slides here to the top-down view. So again, I'll go into more of the planning discussion, but obviously I'm here to answer any traffic questions that may come up. Again, just briefly from a traffic perspective, really no changes from an access management point of view. We are still prohibiting the turns, making a left turn out into Canfield. So everyone coming out of the site on Canfield needs to make a right turn out of the site. And as was mentioned, we are leaving the dedication for the future realignment of Canfield Road to align with Punch Bowl across the street. And you've heard from your engineer regarding, a potential timeline or improvement in that nature. In terms of the application before you, and you've heard from a number of witnesses, really what we're seeing here is somewhat of a downsize of the building on the site. Again, obviously, the existing building will be maintained as discussed by the engineer and the architect, but essentially, as it relates to the new buildings and new structures on the site, this is a lessening over what this board has previously approved. You're still getting the uses that the board was looking for here. I think it was important for the ability for this site to be successful going forward, that it was not just a restaurant or just a furniture showroom. I think it was important in being part of those redevelopment discussions that you have this unique, at least one of a kind for this area type of use. Although I know that this user and tenant has, had multiple very successful sites similar to this, but bringing this type of use to this location was imperative in order to make this site successful and keep this site, have it be a successful adaptive reuse project. So again, as it relates to deviations from the redevelopment plan, you've heard a number of discussions here regarding the vast amount of deviations that are unchanged as part of this project. They relate to the signs. Afton went through an extensive amount of discussion on the signs, but the key pieces, all those deviations were previously approved as it relates to the location, number, size, all that was previously approved. There are some other deviations as it relates to this application that are actually somewhat being improved. So I'll hit those. We previously had a deviation regarding the amount of parking spaces that were tandem. Now we have no tandem parking spaces. So obviously that's an improvement by bringing something that was in non-compliance and actually eliminating the tandem stalls at all, which again, I think are an improvement as it relates to this application. There are a couple of deviations that are, I'd say, technically changing. I think you would, we will put on the record that these are deviations that we're seeking, although I guess it could be somewhat flexible. Your redevelopment plan was very specific regarding square footages of certain uses within the building. It discussed that the building shall not exceed 44,000 square feet in terms of interior space, which we still comply with, but it spelled out the amount of square footage that is to be reused for certain things, such as the new modern gallery size, the existing gallery size, the size of the restaurant, the number of seats, and all those things had plus or minus in the redevelopment plan. Now, I don't know what range plus or minus allows. I don't know if that means plus or minus 10%, 20%. It doesn't discuss. So just to be clear on the record, we obviously are reducing the size of a number of those square footages. So just on the record, I would say we'll be seeking a deviation. But again, we are not exceeding, we're actually reducing that number of square footage. So being less intense than was previously approved. But we'll put on the record, plus or minus is pretty vague. We'll say we made a deviation in that case. There's also a deviation as it relates to, there was discussion about that valet parking because we had parking off-site during peak time periods. Since valet parking is written into the redevelopment plan and we no longer seek to use valet parking, we again would seek a deviation. Again, it's very technical. I actually think, again, it's an improvement that people are not forced to valet park their car in parking spaces in other lots or having to tandem park spaces on this lot. So again, while it is a new deviation that we do not have valet parking, I think that is an improvement as it relates to this application. One of the main changes as it relates to this application in terms of new or changed deviations relates to the parking fields that are located, and I'm going to, along the Canfield Road, which would be the right side of sheet 4, and along Madison Avenue, which is plan sheet down or the bottom facing Madison Avenue. We did have parking in both of those areas, but the parking spaces were not perpendicular, they are parallel. So we are seeking a deviation as it relates to that. Now, I want to speak to the fact that the parking spaces that we are proposing actually have further setbacks from the streets than the old parking spaces that were previously approved. So our parking space setbacks are actually improved along Canfield Road and Madison Avenue. They've just, the space instead of being parallel, they're now more traditional perpendicular. We also, again, are increasing that buffer along the residential neighbor to our rear. Again, we are much closer to those, to that site and in terms of our parking field, and that's been vastly improved as part of this application. Although we did not have a deviation previously, we are now 49.7 feet away from that nearby resident. Previously, we were 10 feet away, and that was what was permitted. Just to give you some numbers, from Madison Avenue, we were 60.4 feet to the closest parking space. Now we're 78.8. So again, a significant improvement in terms of parking space setback. And along Canfield, we were 5.4 feet, where 5 was permitted. Now we're 6.9. So again, it was always permitted to be where it was. We've just increased that buffer. Now, to mitigate that, because typically when you think of the type of deviation in terms of not allowing, let's say, perpendicular parking facing a street or in a front yard, one of the key aspects is the screening of those parking spaces. When cars are pulling in or pulling out, are you seeing headlight glare? Are you seeing those parking spaces? I want to show this plan here, this fourth sheet of the exhibit that we had prepared, to highlight the fact that on both cases, we have extensive screening, so you will not see the parking spaces even upon planting. The planting of the vegetation along Canfield Road, again, would be above at planting height, the height of a vehicle, so you would not see any of those vehicles that are parking within the perpendicular stalls along Canfield Road. And in terms of Madison Avenue, I want to highlight the fact that we have these hedgerows that are specifically designed and angled to block the parking spaces, but not block that center view of basically the Abbey and the basically center entrance. So we've looked at making sure we didn't want to hide the Abbey completely. We didn't want to hide the site completely. So we made sure we had clear line of sight at areas where there were no parking to be screened, but in the areas where there were parking, we've been able to design both hedgerows and obviously the decorative, I guess, walls that hold the signs to the site to be able to mitigate that line of sight to those parking spaces. So overall, I do think that what we have here before the board is a improvement as it relates to the plan before you. Again, I do know, having sat through the last go-rounds of this application, there's always concerns about intensity and the type of site this would be. And again, we've reduced the square footage, reduced the number of seats, which I think is a real driver in terms of what you expect for the number of people coming to a restaurant. Again, I don't know what the Friendly's is up the road from this site, but knowing, having been in Friendly's before, they typically range between 60 and 100 seats. And again, we're in like the 79 seat range. So again, in terms of the number of people that could be sitting inside the restaurant portion, it's pretty much akin to what you'd have at a Friendly's, although I imagine much better food, ambiance, and experience.
Service.
But again, but I just wanted people to understand that this is not like the new steakhouse in Morristown that has seats beyond seats beyond seats. That does sometimes lend you to have, overflow or needs for overflow parking. This being a restaurant of only 79 seats is a fairly small size restaurant compared to what you kind of see in some of these areas. So I wanted to highlight that in terms of that kind of Friendly's comparison. But again, in viewing the application, I believe these deviations can be granted because I do believe that the overall plan is being advanced. The overall purposes of planning is being advanced as part of this application. I do think, again, a number of improvements, reducing the number of tandem spaces to 0, reducing the need for off-site parking, increasing the buffer to the rear neighbor behind us, and also increasing the buffers along Canfield and Madison Avenue are vast improvements here. And that trade-off more than outweighs any negatives as it relates to the parking fields in the front yards along Madison Avenue and Canfield that are now perpendicular versus parallel spaces. I do believe that we do meet purposes A, which is public health, safety, and welfare, purpose I, which is advancing visual environment, purpose J, which is conservation of historic sites, which are all purposes that are being advanced as part of this application. I also do want to highlight that this application, and I've probably mentioned it the last 2 times I've testified in terms of the planning proofs for this project, but we do and remain consistent with the purposes and objectives of the redevelopment plan, which is to preserve a historic structure and grounds that's important to the history of Morris Township, and by encouraging the appropriate reuse options, which I think is still here. We still have gallery and restaurant, which is very important, the reuse of the site, to transform through adaptive reuse of vacant historic property into a viable, more productive retail commercial property. They'll provide for an increase in the economic base for the redevelopment plan area and the town, which I think is being advanced here, and to improve aesthetics on the property. So I think all those items are being advanced as part of this project. I do not see any substantial negative impacts in terms of granting this deviations, whether it's the existing deviations or the new ones. And I do think the applicant has gone out of its way to mitigate any of those potential negative impacts by having those plantings and hedges that will screen those parking spaces that happen to be perpendicular in the front yards. So overall, I do believe that this is an application that the deviations can be granted, similar to the previous versions of this site plan.
Thank you, Mr. Sexton.
Any questions? Yeah, Mr. Lasso.
Chairman, I have a memo that was handed to us from Brightview Engineering. Who they work for.
That's us.
For you.
That's our,
For you.
that's, yes, right.
Oh, boy. Kissinger was our drafting. So,
Yeah, he's with Brett Building.
Yeah, Joe Fishinger's out on vacation, so John Jar, I believe, is the author of that, but
Don't I feel
picked up
stupid
the
So I just question, the turns that come off of the site onto Canfield are restricted left turn only.
Right turn.
Right turn.
Right turn.
Right turn. No prohibit left turn.
Yeah. So is that enforceable by the Morris Township Police Department, or is that just something that you have best intentions?
You can turn 39, right?
Is that an ordinance that needs to be passed? Doesn't that have to become a law in order for the police to enforce it?
It would have to be included with, I believe it's Title 39.
Yes.
So it would have to go in the ordinance, if that's the way it's going to be handled.
Title
39. It is 39.
Yeah. Title 39 gives the police department authorization that's provided by the applicant for on-site circulation and ingress and
This
egress.
is on-site. This is.
Well, but also ingress and egress, so this would be egress. In Title 9 authority, we give them the ability to control it. Our local police, it's not, I'd have to frankly double check if it has to be a separate ordinance or just giving them the authority, give them the, would do it.
Wouldn't it be challengeable if it wasn't an ordinance? Person getting the ticket, turn around and say it's not state law?
Well, it's not a matter of state law, it's a matter of local
municipal.
ordinance, and the fact that it's per an approval with Title 39 authority, subject, candidly, I'd have to double check. I guess the point is in the event an ordinance were necessary, would the applicant, would it be incumbent upon the applicant to make the request of the township committee for same? I don't know that one is, candidly. I don't know if applicant's counsel does offhand.
I have to look at the plan,
I believe the intersection needs to be listed in the ordinance, and then that gives the title, the police the ability to do the Title 39.
The enforcement. But that, you're talking about the intersection of the site or it's not an intersection.
Specific site intersection.
Site intersection, okay. So it's two, they're both on Canfield.
Yeah, my concern is I just don't want to see those turns being made, and then we find out there's really nothing we can do about it.
Right. And I know there's efforts to dissuade and there's signage, et cetera, but.
They've done a great job.
Yeah.
In the
So
design.
Title 39 would be provided, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. And then all I can say is to the extent necessary, a request would have to be made for the ordinance amendment consistent with the approval. Given that this is a redevelopment project that started, involved the governing body, I would imagine but I can't predict that the governing body would be amenable if there is an approval. So I take it the applicant would make the request as a condition.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Limited to that issue.
Limited to that issue, yeah. Okay, if we have the applicant has stipulated, the council has gone along with it. Yes.
And you can imagine if you give the council another shot at a redevelopment plan. All kinds of things.
No.
That's all I was, yep, a specific request, only if necessary.
So second question, Mr. Warner, if the 6-month review finds that there's not adequate parking, would the applicant be able to use that area that was tandem parking, or would they have to come back to the planning board to get approval?
How to rectify, that'd
They
be
have to come
amended.
back.
Yeah, they'd have to come back.
And they should come back.
Yeah, you want to know what.
You want to know, and you want to have some control over the way to mitigate any undue, parking impact.
And again, that's at the 6-month, just to be clear, at the 6-month audit.
That's when it
For a
starts.
duration of 6 months, as I understand it, yeah. Yeah, it was not just a snapshot, if you will. What's going on that day? No, it's not that. So it's an
Thank you.
extensive audit, in my opinion.
I have a question, and Mr. Slate, this is actually more for you now, based on the civil engineer's testimony. Is I correct in finally maybe understanding is that the stormwater management rules have changed since we approved the last one? And
Yeah, there's been some tweaks by EPP.
and so it's a more stringent or better stormwater management now than was approved. If we didn't allow this for some reason and they built to the original approval one, the storm management system or plan would not be as robust as it is now.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
And I just want to clarify in terms of the parking study, because I have the redevelopment plan here. It's required to be done on days selected by the township engineer on Friday, Saturday, and Sundays. And there's 11 time periods that it's supposed to be studied on those days. And then if there's an issue, required to go before the planning board, and it discusses possible remedies such as leasing offsite spaces, potentially municipally owned lots, talks about a church during certain times, obviously not Sunday, during the day. But again, it discusses it right in the redevelopment plan, possible remedies, and it does require us to report back if there's an issue.
Any other questions from you? Mr. Quillen?
I have a question about the planting buffer along the south border. If you look at the north elevation where that long blank wall is that we were talking about, so there'll be some perhaps changes to that wall. But in the absence of that, what can you say about the screening vegetation that will be along the border? How tall it will be?
Are you referring
to
to this wall or the wall that faces Canfield? The one that faces the resident or the one that faces
The wall
Canfield?
that faces the spur of Canfield Road that goes behind the Abbey.
So this one here. So again, the way that the driveway is aligned, if you're driving past and you peek into the site through the driveway, you're actually going to see kind of, if you follow that driveway, you're actually just going to see the trees over here because the driveway is not perfectly aligned. It has that skew. So you likely would not actually see that blank wall as you drive by because of the way that the entrance is skewed. That said, we definitely could work with the landscape architect in terms of maybe some additional screening. And I'm pointing now this landscaped island that looks like it would be a perfect location to do some plantings that would potentially be able to screen that blank wall right before you reach that back aisle of about 10 parking spaces.
I was worried more about the neighbors than I was about people driving in.
So the neighbors have screening along the back, and again, we've added obviously vegetation in the rear. I believe there, and I think the neighbor had asked about it earlier. I do believe there are 2 trees that have died in the rear of the site, which will be replaced with new trees upon planting season.
And how tall are those trees now? How tall might they grow in a few years?
So before we do that, the gentleman who asked the question, can you just come up and point again where your lot is up on the screen so everybody knows? Can you come up? Because I want to make sure we know where your lot is.
And you're really tall, so I know.
Yes, no, very point you're here. Our lot is back here along this, I believe this is 73, which RH owns, and then we're 71 on the other side of.
I got you.
So the trees that we'll be replacing, the trees that have died back there, will be planted at 20 feet and grow to about 40 feet.
Okay. Feet of insulation.
That's what our landscape architect advised.
That's a big tree.
They've been growing already.
Thank you.
Just to clarify, the ones that will be planted will match the existing height. We're not going to have trees that are.
Right. I was assuming that, but I should have asked. Yeah, thanks.
Any other questions from the board? Any board professionals?
Yeah, I thought, Matt, you were gonna be the lucky one who's gonna reconcile the square footages.
Well,
No, thank you.
I think Afton thankfully did most of it. I just want to state that the traffic study specifically looked at the parking requirements, and the parking requirements does exclude certain aspects of back of house, kitchen, things of that nature. So when you look at the architectural plan square footage, it's not going to match what the traffic engineer and myself looked at from the parking standard. So that's why that square footage likely differs than what was testified to in terms of the building.
I think what the board is looking for in terms of the reduction is simply interior square footage, right? How much on a square foot basis was previously approved and how much is now, notwithstanding that some of it is restaurant seating and some of it is gallery space and so forth, because there's some misunderstanding about the amount of the, or the level of the reduction. And there were some issues with the numbers and it didn't sort of reconcile. And maybe it's not you, Matt, but maybe it's somebody else.
No, it was him.
So that was, if I may, Mr. Chairman, that was my question. I'm trying to get a kind of a mental model. If you started out at 100% and then you scaled it down in 2022 and now we're scaling it down again, what does that scale down look like relative to the 22 approval? Is it, what percentage did it come down?
Let me address that. So for the overall total square footage of the building in 2022, it's 51,655 square feet. The current plan is 35,339 square feet, which is about a 32% reduction.
Okay, that's what I was looking for.
Yeah.
Thank you.
That's what we're all.
That's the square foot of the architecture of the building.
Right.
Basement, first floor, second floor.
Okay, thank you.
Excluding exterior furniture.
Yeah.
Excluding exterior furniture, super.
Which is why there's a discrepancy, because the parking standard includes the outdoor spaces,
I got it.
but not the
Yeah.
kitchen and
Yeah.
stuff like that. So that's why the numbers are not going to line up.
There's your 30% reduction in the building area, which everybody's
The
looking
building
for.
reduced by
exactly.
30%, right?
So Matt, just quickly, I want to make sure that we've got the new deviations.
Yep.
Okay, this is not what was previously approved, but this is what I have for the new deviations. The perpendicular spaces where only parallel were allowed, both on Madison and on Canfield. At Madison, you're taking away the valet, which was part of the reason they were parallel there. In Canfield, now you have more room to do a full parking bay. That's the logic there, correct?
Correct.
Okay, great. You discussed the square footages and, the plus or minus in the redevelopment plan. I went back and looked at that. Most of that language is sort of permissive. It talks about what's allowed, what's the maximum, what's permissive. I'm not sure that a deviation is required there, so I think you're fine there. You mentioned the technical deviation that the valet has been removed. The tandem, I think, was also just permissive, so I'm not sure there was a deviation there. There are parking bays now located along the frontages, which is similar to what we just talked about both Madison and Canfield. That's a technical deviation. There's a requirement, and this was just based on the original concept, that the new gallery wing be located at least 100 feet away from the Abbey, the closest point of the Abbey, because you scaled back and brought everything you need here. It's now like 75 feet.
Correct, and I don't think I did mention that, and you're correct. I think previously the new wing was 104.7 feet, now it's 75. Again, it's basically the building development got smaller, and again, you look at positives, we were able to change that parking alignment. We've increased the pervious coverage, reduced the impervious coverage by more than 2 tennis courts on the site. So there is a good trade-off, I think, in that.
And the only other thing I had is what was either approved or in the plan was I think the water feature, the water fountain's gone, and that's now a deviation.
That was, I think, in the last version. It was in the first version, not in the second, still out in the third.
Okay, because there was both a water wall feature and a fountain feature.
Yeah, there used to be a fountain in the front, but that, I think the redevelopment plan spoke about Canfield Road, so I don't think that counted for our water feature.
Okay, and that's all I have is the new DVI. Are you consistent with
That's
that?
consistent with what I have.
That's all I have.
Mr. Warren? Or,
Yes,
before, yeah, Ms. Slate, have you got anything before?
When Jim's done.
Because it'll take Steve forever, so.
You want me to go next? Give you time to look?
No, I'm done.
Good.
You want that back? I have no questions.
Oh, okay.
Okay, you're up.
Thank you. In a nutshell, because you provided the detailed planning testimony with respect to all the deviations, I understood them in a nutshell to be utilizing the C2 flexible C variance standards, which are provided for in the redevelopment plan, because any of the deviations could be established by either the C1 undue hardship or the C2 flexible C benefits substantially outweighing the detriments. These were all quote-unquote C2s in your opinion?
Yes, these were C2 following Kaufman versus Warren Township, I think would be the basis of this
Better plan
application.
alternative?
Correct.
Okay, thank you. And I don't know, I'll direct it to you, I guess. Is, based on the testimony with respect to the potential number of employees and based on the parking configuration, either as a professional planner, a traffic engineer, or perhaps uniquely suited, not just particularly suited, both, would there be any utility in there being an encouragement for employees to park in any particular area or areas, parking fields, I'll call them, or parking areas?
Yeah, I think the desire would be most likely to have the employees park in the spaces furthest from an entrance. So that's usually in the rear. Again, we do kind of have some potential rear access, but typically on the rear or the edge of the site would be the preference.
And there are roughly, what, about 20 or so spaces that would fall into that category?
Approximately, yes.
And there are roughly about 36 spaces that would be in each of the side yard parking fields?
Correct.
Would there be any utility in picking on peak employee days either of the side parking fields to join the rear parking field as a desired area for employee parking? I note one is next to Canfield, if I recall, one is next immediately adjacent to residential lots.
Yeah, if there were to be, obviously, the one next to the residential lot, you'd prefer to be employees because it have less turnover. That said, I would like there to be able to see the site in operation to get an idea of really the true employee demand that drives. I know specifically in the food service business, a lot of the employees may not drive. Again, you have pretty good, decent bus service right here on Madison Avenue. And, a lot of people may carpool as well. So again, I would hesitate to specifically call out spaces right now until we know what the employee base would be.
Okay. And understood. I guess the only question I would have is would there be utility to guiding them toward the rear at least initially?
Yep.
And then see how it plays out, and then there's the audit coming up.
Correct, yes.
Okay. All right, maybe, and that could be a stipulation as well then?
We could include that in the parking audit.
Okay, thank you. Nothing further.
Any other questions?
I do have
Oh,
a
yeah.
question as a follow-up to that. Is there, I'm not sure to the extent of the stormwater management along the back where there was tandem stack parking, but is there any benefit to and is it possible to have a banked parking area there in the event that some parking, would be necessary, or that study shows that, the 6-month review shows that, 10 spots are necessary, and if there was the ability to show that banked parking in that, back lawn area, does that save the need for having to go back to the board?
I'd have to work with the engineer regarding the stormwater management aspects back there before I design on the fly, but that does seem to be a possible alternative. Like you said, have a safety factor in there. Let's say leave room for 10 spaces in case they're needed, and if not, no one knows the difference.
The redevelopment plan lays out the process. So technically, if you change the process, you have to amend the plan or seek a deviation from the plan on the process. I hate to put, I hate to put the parking spaces there banked with the stipulation that we have to put the parking there. See what I'm saying? If we have an issue, I'd like the client to have the option of either renting an off-site lot or looking for some other option than having to put the parking.
Gives everybody the option.
And rather than putting the parking on your own site,
What's that?
rather than putting the parking on your own site.
So, in the court terminology, I've been overruled. So
It's something
the
that.
client said it's fine. If you want
Okay.
to designate these as bank parking now, that's fine with us.
I apologize for, but maybe the board professionals can, there is a process, and that needs to be followed, number one, and number two, to the extent, at least in my thinking, and please jump in, Paul, because I'm the last person that's talking about it. But if it is a potentially viable alternative that exists already, perhaps it's best to allow the process to proceed, the professionals to review it in connection with the audit, the real circumstances on the ground, make sure from a stormwater management perspective and otherwise it's the best option. And then, if I understand correctly, at that point, you'd be coming back to the board and maybe the answer would be, hey, that is the best option and that might be what happens. But it gives everybody options and an opportunity to review what is in fact the best alternative, if it's necessary at the time. I don't know, but that was my way of giving my thoughts and giving, handing it off to Paul.
Excuse me, I'm not clear on what we're talking about. Are you designating bank parking now, or you're saying when we do the review, we're going to decide whether that's an option or not?
I was suggesting that.
Yeah, I suggest that we wait and see if there's an issue before we decide that we need
I
bank parking.
hate to go against Jim, but
Right.
I mean, the other thing is, Jim, and that there may be, as pointed out by the witness, there may be stormwater issues there if they're using it for stormwater. But I think we have to see first whether there's a problem, what's the extent of the problem, and that may not solve the problem, even if it's random spaces there. So
TBD, I think it's a TBD.
There's an area that
Yeah.
you could just simply lay out parking, and I'm just trying
Yeah.
to simplify the process.
I understand.
because what we have spelled out is uncomplicated. It's not,
Yeah.
complicated,
I mean,
costly, involved.
I don't think the applicant can disagree with me, but I don't think it's in the context of this redevelopment plan, the idiosyncratic nature of the use. And everyone knows parking is always an unknown, but a major concern, as Mr. Alesso points out. I don't think it's unreasonable or onerous to ask the applicant to do the study. They've agreed to do it. They come back with the results, and then the board and the applicant work out a solution, which may be beyond the tandem parking. So why bank it now is kind of my thought.
Right.
So, Mr. Slade has now been overruled.
Frank's back in charge.
Any other questions? Yeah, Mr. Flowers.
Mr. Jesse.
Mr. Jesse, yes.
So on the other side of that, when we're talking about perhaps banking the spots, but we're not now, where the stormwater management area is, RH owns that property, right? Is there currently still a single family home there, 73 Canfield?
Yes.
Yes.
So the home still stands?
Correct.
Is it okay to ask, is it like, what's the status of that? What's the plan for it?
Yeah, certainly. Our intent at some point in time will be to redevelop it and sell it.
Okay. That's fine.
That should be a different conversation.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Well, that's all it was.
We're gonna have a
Yeah,
public
yeah, yeah.
comment
There's no-
portion, so you can under oath make your comments.
I wasn't even sure if it was really
It's residential,
related to this application.
I'm
Who's
sorry, did you
speaking?
not hear me?
Who's talking?
We're gonna have a public comment portion of these quasi judicial proceedings, but they must follow the law. That portion is not yet. It will be shortly. Okay, thank you.
Right now, it's time for any questions of public of this witness. Before, okay, seeing none.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Would you like to sum up your?
Yeah, I'll be very, very brief. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see you.
Dan Conley, 47 Crescent. I don't know if now is the right time. Stop me if it's not. I was wondering about traffic on the Madison, I guess the main entrance. Was there any study done on how traffic in and out is going to impact like this, the Madison Ave traffic? I'm asking because I live on Crescent. I turned left out of Crescent to go get my daughter at daycare, particularly at rush hour, like around like 5 o'clock. There can be like some it's never horrible, but there can be some backup at the, I guess it's the Punch Bowl Canfield intersection. Did you guys do any reports on like how that is going to be impacted?
Yeah, so we did reports during the last two portions of this application. We also did an update as part of this portion of the application because everything got less. The traffic levels that we studied previously that are being generated by this site will be reduced because the number of seats went down, so you have less customers for the restaurant. The square footage of the showrooms went down, so you have less customers for the showroom. So the traffic study previously, and I'll give you the quick synopsis, does support a full movement driveway along Madison Avenue that's supported by the DOT, so you can make left turns and right turns out. But the key aspect here is that this application is providing a dedication along Canfield Road, so Canfield and Punch Bowl could line up. And the issue why you get traffic here a lot is the intersection, because it's offset, has what's called split phase timing, which means Canfield goes and then Punchfield goes or vice versa. They can't go at the same time. So it leaves Madison Avenue with red lights for really long periods. When they get realigned, they'll run together. So you'll be able to actually get more green time on Madison Avenue, which will then help alleviate some of that. So this kind of unlocks the key for that to happen. I think Mr. Slate spoke about the timeline or potential timelines that the police and the township are looking at.
I have a couple others, but I'm going to save them for the
Comment.
comment session. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay. No.
I'm sorry, just
Yes.
one, and I apologize. I just want to make sure the Brightview Engineering memo of January 13th, 2025, still warm. Can you stipulate everything in there? There are a couple items towards the end. I noticed 7 and 8 with respect to signage, striping, traffic controls, et cetera. I just wanted to have it clear on the record, because if there's an approval, it will be in the approval. So,
Yes, we'll agree.
okay, thank you. I'm sorry.
Okay.
I think we all missed that one.
Yeah.
Yeah, we still need public comment, yep.
Yeah.
I just wanted to make sure we got that
Right,
stipulated.
I'd like to give Mr. Tola a chance to sum up and
But we still need public comment
before his,
before the summation.
oh, okay. I'm sorry. Okay, now is the time for public comment. And anyone with a comment? Now, this, you need to swear them in, right?
Yes, I'll swear them in each as they speak. Just so you know, when you make your public comment, I swear you in, just like I swore in the witnesses for the applicant, because your public comment is every bit as important. So I want it to be testimony, I don't want it, the law requires it, I also want it, but the law requires that we swear you in so that it has the same weight as all evidence provided by the applicant. So that's why I'll do that when you get to the podium, each of you as you provide your comment.
Thank you, Matt.
So if you'll raise your right hand. Do you swear to God or affirm that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you. And your name and address again for the record, please.
Adam Vincent, 71 Canfield Road. I just wanted to say that we strongly support many aspects of this plan. We think that the reduction in the size of the gallery and the restaurant are much more conducive to the size of the lot, as well as the neighborhood as a whole. This includes the reconfigured parking. The less impact on the rear yard neighborhoods is important to us for both like noise and light pollution purposes. A quick note about our experience with the trees so far. So not to harp on this point too much, but my understanding was that the trees that would be planted would be 30 feet. I'm not sure. I'm not an arborist, but I'm not sure the trees that are planted currently are even 20 feet right now. Additionally, although 2 are dead, I think there may be more that are dying right now. From my second floor in my house, I can see straight through to the Canfield Madison Avenue intersection, whereas I think if the trees were 20 feet, that wouldn't be possible. So yeah, we appreciate that the trees would grow to be 40 feet, but I wanted to seek some clarity as well as just share those observations so far. Otherwise, we look forward to continuing to collaborate with RH as we
And if I might be able to ask questions that perhaps help clarify for you, I don't know if it's 30 feet or 20 feet on installation. I'd candidly be surprised if it were 30 feet, but nevertheless, there is a maintenance obligation with respect to landscaping for dead and diseased trees, et cetera, for a period of time. Isn't that correct, counsel, for the applicant? Yes. Yes. Please raise your right hand. Do you swear to God or affirm testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. And again, your name and address for the record.
Paul Gammerniger, 63 Canfield Road. And the only thing I wanted to bring up was when you talked about the redevelopment of the property owned by RH, which is right adjacent to the property. That's a residential neighborhood right next to the business, Adam and Sarah. But can that just be redeveloped as part of the property, or is it residential? And that's all.
That property is outside the limits of this redevelopment area,
But it's owned by the.
but that doesn't matter who owns it. It's,
Yeah, I think the confusion is that he said the word redeveloped, and I think he was just saying rebuilding the house.
We're gonna renovate it and do.
Renovate it, yeah. Yeah, no, it's a good pickup, sure. Yep.
Good question. Yes. Yep.
Yep, you can give up. Thank you. Do you swear to God or affirm that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. Name and address again, please. Thank you.
Dan Conley, 47 Crescent. I promise I'll make this quick. If you could just go, zoom out. I had a couple questions. Again, I'm new. I wasn't here for most of the previous discussion, so I appreciate. I was wondering why the trees stop. They're only on the. I'm losing my directions. The south side. How come they don't come along? I guess the west side. What was the rationale for that? Was that ever considered?
Well, you could just say, tell him.
So those trees, I think it's just not coming through in the rendering. Those trees are existing and healthy today. So it's just not coming through on the rendering, but there are trees that are filling this gap right here adjacent to these water meadows.
All right. Well, do that. Because one of the things I was thinking about, there was discussion about, I think, the blank wall right here. I was having the same thoughts about the blank wall on the other side of the building, which obviously faces my house and the house right next to me. So if there are like mitigations for that side of the building, I wonder if they could also be considered for the other side of the building, like the south-facing building.
For you, we will do that.
And okay, this is really nitpicky, but I have to ask again. This little white box, this guy, it looks like on the plan, which I was able to find, thank you, is a transformer. I know there was a noise study done, but I'm not a scientist. Is that thing going to be rumbling and rocking all night long? Like, what is that transformer? Is there any information available on that? Is that something that we're sitting in our backyard, we can hear that thing kind of popping and crackling, or is any research done on that?
I will say generally, when a transformer starts crackling and sparking, it's time to call the fire.
You get my gist.
I don't think it shouldn't make noise.
And that's why the sound wall.
Well, they're
is on
looking, I can't speak to transformers, although I would agree with Mr. Slade about calling the fire department if it was. But there's the condition with respect to the occupancy noise audit is post-occupancy noise audit. So in other words, hasn't occurred yet. It will happen when there's when the property is, if approved, occupied. So I suspect that any noise coming from the transformer, if there is any, would be included within it, and there are standards provided by the State Department of Environmental Protection that they cannot exceed, and that's how it's what it's tested against.
Yeah, and I would also note that we spent a fortune on hedgerows with a sound attenuating fence in the middle of it.
Yeah.
And so we highly doubt you're ever going to hear that. Nonetheless, we will have this post occupancy study. And so if there's any issues there, we will certainly address it.
Appreciate it. Yeah, like I said, just had to ask.
Yeah, no, for sure. Yep, you got it.
Okay.
Yes, if there's no more public comment, Mr. Chairman, then yes, we are at the point of summation by applicant's counsel.
Again, I'll be very brief. Thank you, board, for your time this evening. As they say, let's hope 3 times the charm here. This is the second amendment of this plan. Sometimes things happen for a reason. It's a smaller project. It's, we think, right sized for the site now. Like things after COVID, retail, furniture, everything went nuts. So there were, of course, bigger plans, more money, et cetera. But this one, actually, it really worked out terrifically. We think we were able to retain the design and the the materials for this site. We park it all on site. You don't have issues of people running across the street, valets, that whole business now we're avoiding. So we're very happy with the way this amended site plan turned out. You heard the proofs for the deviations. We believe they're well-founded. And I think if I speak for my client, we're very excited to continue the work that's now just been started on the site and finally get this project to fruition so we all can enjoy it. So thank you very much for your time this evening.
Thank you. Mr. Warner?
Certainly, Mr. Chairman, I'm happy to try to tee it up as I always do, and hopefully occasionally I succeed. So this, what the board is seeking, what the applicant is seeking is, as I have it, and please correct me if I'm wrong, amended preliminary and final major site plan approval and redevelopment plan deviations. The redevelopment plan deviations, I'm going to go from the notice that was provided and try to quickly go through that list, and I can be corrected where I'm wrong if anything's changed since. I have modification of conditions of prior approvals. The valet parking is now eliminated. Front yard building setback of 118.2 feet from Madison Avenue, whereas 118.8 feet was previously approved. I think that's about a half a foot. And 120 foot is required by the plan. Building and yield parking setbacks, approximately 11 perpendicular parking spaces between the building and Madison Avenue, where only parallels are allowed. Building and yield parking setbacks, approximately 38 perpendicular parking spaces between the building and Canfield Road, where only parallels are permitted. Building and yield indoor space, approximately 11,992 square feet of retail gallery or showroom space, where a total of approximately 14,000 square feet of the existing Abbey is required to be repurposed for such use. Building and yield indoor space proposed approximately 9,988 square feet of new modern gallery space, where a total of approximately 15,000 square feet spread across 2 floors of the new modern gallery is required. More indoor space deviations, proposed approximately 2,396 square feet of restaurant and associated wine bar space, although technically it's not a wine bar anymore, it's a service bar. But in any event, we're approximately 15,000 square feet of restaurant and associated wine bar space containing a single-story restaurant with thin indoor seating and food and beverage preparation space is required. So these are deviations going back to the original plan as well. Parking requirements, parking configuration, proposed parking along the Madison Avenue and Canfield Street frontages, whereas the plan required surface parking shall be provided in parking bays located to the south and west of the building away from those bounding streets. Building design massing requiring that any new construction be separated at least 100 feet from all areas of the remaining Abbey structure, where the applicant is now proposing new construction approximately 75 feet, not 100 feet, from the remaining Abbey structure. Bear with me, there's a few more. Building design materials requiring the use of trellises or canopies, framing first level windows and doors, particularly along hallways and other passages, and used as armatures for climbing plants, where the applicant is not proposing the use of these design elements. Materials requiring that all facade lighting shall be by means of wall-mounted sconces, where the applicant is proposing facade lighting by other means. Outdoor patio furnishings requiring that outdoor patio display areas adjoining restaurant shall be landscaped and furnished with high-quality elements that create an inviting, attractive space with valued sensory benefits all year round, and shall include fountains, sculptures, jet water, etc. Whereas the applicant is not proposing these design features or elements. Some of them I'm noting were previously eliminated in prior approvals. Outdoor patio furnishings requiring that the installation of a water wall feature along Canfield Road frontage not to exceed 16 feet in height, where the applicant is not proposing to use this design feature. Again, that was one that was previously eliminated, as I recall, by a prior approval. Outdoor patio furnishings, outdoor patio and related plantings requiring the installation of climbing vines on trellises and or walls of the new wings to soften the facades within the two outdoor display areas, where the applicant is not proposing these design elements. Outdoor patio and related plantings requiring the installation of Mediterranean and similar species of fruit trees within the restaurant to create dappled shade, a feeling of enclosure, and an organic contrast to the architectural features within the two outdoor patio display areas, where the applicant is not proposing these design features. I have to say some of these terms I did not learn in law school. Fences and walls, the applicant proposes pillars having a height of up to 9 feet 8 inches along Madison Avenue and up to 7 feet 9 inches along Canfield.
That's why you're a lawyer.
The height of pillars is not specifically addressed, but there's a lot of reasons why I'm a lawyer. The height of, and nothing else. The height of pillars is not specifically addressed by the redevelopment plan. However, the maximum permitted height for walls along Madison Avenue is 4 feet and Canfield 6 feet. So the walls still exceed. Monument signs proposes a total of 6 restoration hardware logo signs and a total of 6 structures, whereas there was only 1 monument sign permitted previously. The width of the monument sign is a deviation. They propose a monument sign having a dimension of 23 feet wide by 6 feet high at the corner of Madison Avenue and Canfield, whereas the maximum permitted sign for a monument sign is 6 feet tall by 3.5 feet wide and 3.5 feet deep per the redevelopment plan. And finally, he says, entry signs, proposing 3 entry signs, same consisting of 3 pairs of entry signs or 6 entry signs in total, located at the front facade and 2 rear gates from the parking area to the rear courtyard, whereas 4 plaque-style entry signs, each sign not to exceed 4 square feet, are permitted. I hope you kept track of that because I don't think anybody wants me to repeat it. Those are all of the deviations. I don't think I missed anything, did I, applicant's counsel or our planner?
I don't believe so.
Thank you.
Excuse me. I didn't hear, maybe I missed it. the follow-up action on any removed stained glass and the softening of the walls.
Yeah, no, I haven't got to the conditions yet.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
I'm
that
sorry.
was literally just the items of relief. The
Okay, all right,
deviations.
thank you.
There were 19 deviations. The conditions are, as I have them, are all prior conditions stipulated to and from all prior approvals to the extent not inconsistent with this approval, if there is an approval. Of course, if there's a denial, there's no conditions. And that would include the salvaging, et cetera, of the stained glass, the post occupancy noise audit, the post occupancy parking audit that was discussed, and all the other conditions of both approvals. In addition, we have a few new stipulated two conditions of approval, those being as follows. The Madison Avenue curbing, I think that might have been a condition or an original site plan requirement, but nevertheless, it's stipulated to. We've also have stipulations, the softening of the back walls, the two walls and now the three walls that require softening by virtue of a lack perhaps of fenestration on those walls. I have north and south wall, and then the wall that was described by the member of the public that was stipulated to. Those three subject to the review and approval. Bear with me. I don't know why I don't have it here, but I believe oh yeah, here it is. I had it first. Subject to the review and approval of our planner, as I anticipated. And we also have the Title 39 ongoing obligation, as well as to the extent necessary, if an ordinance amendment is required to include the intersection of the two Canfield egress points with the subject property, or the intersection with Canfield Road. To the extent an amendment to our ordinance is required, the applicant will request same, strictly limited to the left turn prohibition from both egress points, as well as guidance to the employees to park in the rear parking lot. And that is all I have, but I'm open to whatever I may have missed.
Guidance to where the EV charging stations can be found.
Oh, will there be guidance to signage?
ADA.
Or ADA.
ADA.
Oh, there'll be an ADA EV space. Yes, one of the EV spaces must be an ADA space.
I'm just talking about a small little sign that somebody can be directed to where they can find EV parking.
That dictates where you can find EV parking.
You'll stick to that? That will be
That's all.
EV parking directional sign will also be stipulated to.
Well, is
and
that,
will be.
I would just have a question. Is that really necessary? Because in the EVs, don't they tell you where the chargers are?
Yeah.
Like, don't
they do,
The
yes.
car tells you where to
The
go.
car is smart enough to tell you where they
Can be a
are.
little bit,
Yeah.
a lot of signage is not always good.
Okay.
I don't know.
No, you're right. The cars do.
As an owner of
super
EV,
smart.
I don't think it's necessary.
Right, you're right.
Can I just refer to, excuse me, Bright View
I
Engineering.
Take that back.
I don't think we need another.
Item number
Take it back.
4. Oh, no, item number 5. It says, based on the parking table in the amended plan, the site provides 108 total parking spaces, inclusive of 4 ADA parking spaces. And there are also 4 ready-made EV parking spaces, inclusive of 1 ADA ready-made EV. So it already, they have said it's already there.
Right.
That's
Yeah,
already.
the
No, it's the Bright
one of the 4.
View Engineering said it's already in the plan.
right. I think they got it right, yes. And I think, Frank, you got it
I'm
right
just
by
curious
saying
why
they
we're
got it
adding a
right.
stipulation if it's already in the plan.
I did not see that. I looked for that.
Yeah, I looked for it. I didn't
I
see
did
it.
not
That's why I
see
asked the
the
question
space.
on the,
I understand what's in the report.
Right,
but
right.
It's not on the plan.
right.
Yeah, they
Okay.
could, we'll have it as a condition so they make sure
Okay,
that one of the EV spaces is indeed an ADA EV space, even though that's the intention. So
EV
belt and
ready.
suspenders
Doesn't
just in
require
case.
a charger there. It requires.
We got a
And,
pretty
uh,
good record.
Yeah.
It's in
The
there.
wiring.
So
Okay.
now
It's
it's-
capable of putting it in.
You got it.
But you
I
don't
think,
have to
yeah,
actually put it in.
We'll all show up with a belt and suspenders. So, and just for clarification, we are not accepting, thank you nevertheless, the stipulation for EV parking directional signage, as I understand it.
Right.
Right.
I didn't miss anything, applicant, all those conditions were stipulated to?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Hopefully, we're ready for the board to deliberate and vote.
I have a question, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
For Mr. Warner. Mr. Warner, if this application, suppose, was not to be approved, then the bounce back is to the last application that was approved.
I'm going to let applicants counsel weigh in, even though I believe I know the answer.
This is why we have a discussion.
Yeah, I mean, it would be the.
Yeah.
It would be the.
Yes, I'm sorry.
Is there a motion?
I move for approval.
Real quick
as
though, the
presented.
curbing, you said Madison Avenue, but I think it's both Madison and Canfield, right?
Well, it's
Canfield
curving,
has
it's
it.
shown on.
Canfield already had it. Okay,
Canfield
sorry.
already has it.
Yeah, the concern was Madison because apparently it wasn't on the plan, so we wanted to make sure.
Gotcha, okay, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I move for approval with all the laundry list of stipulations and
I'll second that with the laundry list of conditions, and
Belt and
stipulations.
suspender.
Any quick comments before we?
I have a quick comment,
Yes.
Mr. Chairman. As everyone knows, I've voted against this twice. I think the site is still too small for the size of the project, and I believe there'll be a parking issue. But based on the fact that they've greatly improved it, I take back my objection strongly.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's a lot of improvement in it, architecturally and practically and everything else. I'm kind of pleased to see how it's turned out and hope that it continues.
Come back again.
Yeah, no, please don't come back again. Please do not come back again.
I don't mind coming back.
Yeah. We have a motion and a second. Can you call the roll?
Mr. Alessio.
Yes.
Ooh.
Ms. Van Order.
Yes.
Mr. Flowers.
Yes.
Mr. Rabbit.
Yes, and best of luck.
Ms. Murphy.
yes, I'm going to visit the bar and the restaurant.
Service bar. There is no bar.
There's no.
I'll have a wine.
Yes, and I'm gonna walk there.
Yeah.
Mr. Quillen.
Yes.
Mr. Wrigley.
Yes.
Mr. Bye.
Yes,
So
Thank you very much, everybody.
thanks.
Thank you. Thank you, members of the public.
Thank you very much.
It's not on the agenda, but before we move on, is there a comment from the public unrelated to the specific application? But yes,
I just want to clarify something. There's no curbing on the Canfield side of the road.
but it's in the plan.
It's on the
The
plan.
question was because he didn't see the curbing on Madison Avenue.
It's only on the other side by.
Right. But the curbing is in the plan to be installed as part of the thing.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anything reports from the legislative
No.
committee? No need for a closed session at this time?
I make a motion, we adjourn.
Is there a second?
Second.
Yes.
All in
Second.
favor?
Aye.
I was hoping.